Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the darkest alleys of Victorian London. Not the polished ballrooms and royal palaces, but the hidden, festering corners where the desperate slept, coughed, and clawed their way through another night. We're talking about doss houses, places so wretched, so foul, you probably won't survive this. Not in one piece anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No pressure. Also, drop your city and time in the comments. I always love seeing who's still awake out there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive in London with nothing but the filthy bundle of rags slung over your back and a coat so thin the damp wind cuts right through it. Your boots are cracked and leaking, your stomach's empty, and every alley smells like a public toilet. London's a monster, and you're fresh meat. It's not a question of thriving here. It's a question of not dying too quickly. The streets spit you out near Whitechapel, though it's hard to be sure. Everything's a maze of soot-stained buildings and narrow passages clogged with mud and waste. Your eyes sting from the fog, not the pretty fog from storybooks, but the oily kind, thick with chimney smoke and something acrid that makes your nose burn. You haven't slept in 2 days. Every doorway you tried was either already occupied or guarded by some poor soul with a shiv. That's when someone mutters behind you, just loud enough to register, "Try the doss house round the corner." Sixpence'll get you off the street, if you don't mind rats. You don't hesitate. Sixpence is half your coin total, but staying outside another night feels like volunteering for pneumonia. The door's warped wood, swollen from moisture, and when you push it open, the smell hits like a slap to the face. Stale urine, spoiled meat, sour sweat, mold, and wet dog. Except there are no dogs here, just humans. Inside is dim, the only light coming from a candle stub perched in a greasy bottle. Shadows bend along the floorboards, which creak like they're in pain under your weight. It's a long room with low ceilings, packed tight with bodies on wooden benches, floor mats, and what might have once been mattresses, but now look like collapsed bags of hay. You freeze for a second. This place is wrong. Your gut says so, but your legs give out before your brain can vote, and you sink onto a vacant plank bench. Welcome to the doss house. You hand over your coin to a man sitting behind a crate who might be the keeper. He's got a swollen red nose, watery eyes, and a permanent sneer. No words, just a grunt as he takes your money and gestures vaguely toward the far wall. You pass by shapes that might be people sleeping or dying. It's hard to tell. Someone nearby lets out a long, phlegmy cough. You suddenly become aware of how wet your own lungs feel. Not a great sign. There are no real beds. If you're lucky, you get a bench to yourself. If not, you'll be shoulder to shoulder with strangers who smell like moldy potatoes and despair. You find an open corner and claim a patch of floor, avoiding a stain that might be blood. Or tea. You hope it's tea. The air is so thick it feels alive. You try not to breathe too deeply. Every inhale brings a new note to the scent symphony. Feet, gin, something rotting in the rafters. You lie down, arms crossed over your chest, staring up at the cracked ceiling. A spider the size of your thumbnail skitters across a beam overhead. It's not the worst company you've had. The walls are stained with damp streaks, and one of the small, grimy windows is cracked, letting in a cold draft that snakes across the floor. There's no warmth here. Not from the bodies, not from the structure, and certainly not from the staff. You hear muttering from a nearby group. An argument, maybe, or a shared dream. Someone laughs too loud and is instantly shushed with a hiss. Quiet hours are a joke. The rules are as warped as the floorboards. Still, you almost doze off, your body that tired, your stomach hollow enough to make you lightheaded. But then something crawls across your leg. You slap at it and catch a crunch. Too big to be a flea, too fast for a cockroach. Possibly a rat. Possibly worse. You sit up, hugging your knees. Sleep will have to wait. This place, you learn fast, doesn't sleep. There's always motion. Someone moaning in a nightmare. Someone stumbling back from the corner bucket where people relieve themselves. Someone whispering, maybe praying, maybe plotting. And that strange constant rustle of vermin moving through the straw and rags. You think of the street, of the cold stone under your spine and the wind like knives. This is better, you tell yourself. This is shelter. But you don't believe it. The thing is, London doesn't care about you. The city is a machine built to grind up bones and spit out smoke. You're just another bit of grit in the gears. If the doss house doesn't kill you, the street will. And if not the street, the workhouse. And if not that, well, there's always the Thames. Here's a historical fun fact for you to ponder while trying not to inhale too deeply. By the mid-19th century, there were over 200 doss houses in London, housing more than 30,000 of the city's poorest. They were technically legal and loosely regulated, but most operated like this one: overcrowded, disease-ridden, and barely fit for rats. And speaking of rats, here's your fringe detail. In some of the worst houses, rats were known to crawl into the beds with sleeping lodgers, not just for warmth, but for a nibble. You try not to dwell on that one. There's still debate among historians about whether doss houses helped or harmed the urban poor. Some argue they were better than nothing, offering at least minimal shelter. Others say they concentrated illness, crime, and abuse in ways that made life even more dangerous. Either way, you're here now. You've joined the ranks of the forgotten, clinging to sleep in the belly of the city's filthiest beast. Outside, you hear a church bell strike 3. Still hours until dawn. Still no hope of rest. You lie back down anyway. There's nowhere else to go. Morning arrives not with light, but with movement. Around 5 o'clock, a rustling stirs through the sleeping bodies, a slow, sour wave of shuffling limbs and muffled groans. You open your eyes just as someone steps over your head, bare feet slick with grime, toenails like blackened little scythes. The smell is worse in daylight somehow, like the warm breath of the building has grown confident and bolder now that you've all survived the night. You're still here. Congrats. But don't get too comfortable. You sit up and wince. Every muscle aches. Your clothes are damp, and your skin itches in a dozen places you can't reach without making it weird. Your hands feel sticky. You don't want to know why. The spot where you slept has left a faint mark on your trousers, and there's a questionably shaped wet patch a few inches from where your head had been. You scoot away, then regret moving at all. The air is thicker now, like someone boiled cabbage in sewage and poured it into your lungs. The keeper's voice finally cuts through the morning chaos, raspy and mean. Up, clear out by 6, no good morning, no thank you for not dying. Just that bark and a gesture toward the door with his stick. Some folks grumble. One older man coughs so hard he nearly topples over, but everyone moves. You move. Because the only thing worse than paying 6 pence for a night in that pit is overstaying and getting your ribs cracked for free. You stumble toward the exit, dragging your satchel behind you. There's no such thing as personal hygiene here. No wash basin, no toilet, and certainly no privacy. A few folks splash water from a barrel out back, if they're feeling ambitious or diseased. You don't. The water's got floating bits anyway, and it's cold. Bone-biting cold. Now comes the worst part, breakfast, or what passes for it. You follow the sluggish flow of bodies to a side alley where a vendor sets up near the Doss house most mornings. He's called Stinky Bill, and you're about to find out why. His breath alone could fumigate a tenement. He wears a coat patched so many times it's become a historical artifact, and his cart is filled with something boiling. Could be stew, could be glue. He ladles it out in cracked bowls for a penny apiece. Not that many can afford even that. You offer a coin, not even sure if it's yours, or one you found stuck to your boot, and he hands you a bowl. It smells gray. That's the only way to describe it. A mix of turnips, questionable meat, and yesterday's regrets. You eat it anyway. Hunger wins. The taste isn't even the worst part. It's the texture. Stringy, with surprise lumps and an aftertaste like candle wax. You gag once, discreetly. Some nearby kids aren't so lucky. One throws up and keeps eating. You realize, disturbingly, that this might be the most nutrition you'll get all week. As you slurp the last of it down, because you're not letting any of that go to waste, you hear someone mutter beside you, "Better'n what they served last week? Rat stew, that was." Fur and all, you glance at him. He doesn't look like he's joking. By mid-morning, you're back to wandering. You don't have work, not today, and probably not tomorrow unless a miracle or a death opens up a spot on a road crew or in the tanneries. So you walk. You walk because stopping means thinking. And thinking leads to dangerous places. Like remembering you once had clean clothes or a bed, or people who looked at you with something other than indifference or contempt. You pass another Doss house, this one with a slightly fancier sign, paint not completely flaked off. Shelter, 6 pence a night. Bed and board. A lie, obviously. No one uses the word bed honestly anymore. But you make a mental note, if the current dump refuses you next time, maybe you'll try this slightly less moldy alternative. You're not the only one eyeing your options. There's a whole world of people moving quietly through London's cracks. The ones who aren't yet dead, but not quite alive either. A woman walks past with a child tied to her back and another clutching her hand, both barefoot. An older man mutters to himself and scrawls something on the wall in chalk, then spits at it. Everyone's surviving in the same ghostly rhythm. Wake, wander, scavenge, sleep, repeat. The city doesn't care who you are, just how long you can stay invisible. You find a stoop and sit for a bit, watching the street wake up. Carriages rattle by, the horses looking healthier than most of the people. A lamplighter moves down the block, extinguishing the last of the gaslights. You envy him. A job. A purpose. Maybe even boots without holes. You imagine asking how he got there. What string of luck or decisions led him to light and not darkness? But he walks past without looking at you. That's fair. You barely exist. There's a historical footnote for you to chew on while you digest that breakfast horror. 6 pence might not sound like much now, but back then, it was a full day's wage for many laborers, if they could find work. For someone on the fringes like you, that 6 pence could mean the difference between a lice-ridden bench and freezing to death under a bridge. And yes, this system fueled an entire economy of landlords who profited handsomely by cramming as many humans as possible into these so-called lodging houses. A sort of proto-Airbnb, if Airbnb also included smallpox and bucket toilets. Here's your quirky tidbit for the day. Some Doss houses didn't even bother with benches or mats. Instead, you could pay to sit all night in a room, propped upright among a group of equally miserable strangers. No leaning, no lying down, just sitting. For hours, that was cheaper. It was called a penny sit-up. And yes, it was as delightful as it sounds. There's still ongoing debate among social historians about whether the Doss house system was a symptom of deeper poverty or a cause of its spread. Did they give people just enough to survive while trapping them in a cycle? Or were they genuinely the last safety net before total collapse? You don't have the luxury of pondering that too deeply. Your stomach already feels sour. Could be the stew. Could be the existential dread. The day's not even half done, and you already know where it's heading. You'll walk, maybe try a soup kitchen if you can get in. You'll avoid constables. You'll dodge the feverish ones. And by dusk, you'll shuffle back toward the doss house with a coin clenched in your fist like a secret. Because no matter how vile it is inside, it's still better than the night air gnawing through your ribs. You get up, joints cracking, and start walking again. The evening fog slides in like a thief. By the time the sun surrenders, the streets are already cloaked in that peculiar London soup, thick, gray, and sour, tasting faintly of soot and damp boots. You're back in the alley outside the doss house, sixpence clutched so tight in your hand it's left a permanent dent in your palm. You feel like Gollum guarding his precious, except instead of magic, this coin just buys you a horizontal surface and maybe a rat-free patch of floor. No guarantees. The doorway looks the same as last night, but worse now that you know what's behind it. You hesitate for half a second. A cold wind punches through your coat, and that settles it. The alternative is sleeping in the street again, and your spine still hasn't forgiven you for the last time. Inside, the warmth hits immediately, but not in a good way. It's like walking into a mouth. The air is thick, sour, and wet, impossible to breathe without tasting. You pause just past the threshold, letting your eyes adjust. Not that it helps much. The doss house glows in the flicker of a few oil lamps and candles, but mostly it's just shadows, movement, and stink. You find a spot on the same bench as last night, though this time there's competition. A woman with a nose like a hawk's beak eyes you up and down, calculating whether you're a threat or just another scrap of human meat. She shifts grudgingly to make room. You mutter thanks. She doesn't respond. From your seat, you can see the full horror of the place. Bodies slumped in corners, some sitting upright in silent misery, others already curled on the floor, trying to sleep through the noise. It's louder tonight. More coughs, more arguments, more clanking of bottles. Someone laughs too hard in the back, and you hear the unmistakable crack of knuckles meeting flesh. A short scuffle, then silence. Nobody intervenes. Nobody ever does. The scent is a new blend tonight. Sweat, of course. But also something metallic, maybe blood, and something unmistakably fishy. You don't want to think too hard about that. The stench clings to your clothes, your skin, even your breath. You've become part of it, woven into the tapestry of stink. You notice a child, no more than 6, curled in a corner, bundled in a threadbare blanket, thumb in mouth, face slack with sleep. Their mother, maybe, sits nearby, knees hugged to her chest, watching the room like a soldier. Her eyes never stop moving. You don't know how people raise children in this, but they do. Or try. You've heard the horror stories, babies born in doss houses, sometimes dead before dawn, sometimes wrapped in rags and carried out before the keeper even notices. No paperwork, no names, just another ghost. Dinner tonight is non-existent. You've already spent your only coin. You chew a crust of bread you found earlier, hard enough to chip a tooth. No one offers anything. Sharing here is rare, and when it happens, it's usually between family or gang members. You're neither. It's getting colder. Someone started a small fire in a tin can by the wall, but the smoke is already choking half the room. The keeper doesn't care. He's slumped behind the desk, one boot on the counter, sipping from a bottle and pretending not to hear the fights or the moaning. Every so often he yells, "Quiet!" without looking up. It's a ritual, not a rule. You notice something crawling on the wall, Long-legged, shiny, it vanishes into a crack. Probably just another beetle. You've stopped keeping track of all the species that share this place. Spiders, lice, fleas, silverfish, and of course, rats. One of the regulars, an older man missing most of his teeth, once claimed he woke up with a rat on his chest, gnawing through the buttons of his coat. You laughed at the time. Now, you're not so sure he was lying. Here's a charming historical footnote to chew on while trying not to inhale too deeply. In some of the larger doss houses, occupants had to bring their own straw for bedding, or pay extra to rent it. Not fresh straw, just slightly less moldy straw. The idea of sheets was pure fantasy. You lie down on your bench and shift, trying to ignore the movement beneath your coat. It's subtle, an itch just below the collar, then another near your waistband. Lice, probably, or fleas. You'll find out soon enough. This place isn't just shelter. It's an ecosystem. Someone starts singing. It's an old sea shanty, or what's left of one. Half the words lost to drink or dementia. A few others join in, not so much for joy as for defiance. For 5 minutes, the place feels less like a coffin and more like a shared human tragedy. You hum along, quietly. The man next to you leans in and whispers, "Used to sing that in Dover. Before the war. Before I came back with only one eye and a box of medals they melted down for scrap." Then he leans back and closes his eye. Doesn't speak again. This is how the night moves, slowly, with interruptions. Someone sobbing, someone retching, someone sneaking a hand into a neighbor's pocket. You stay alert. Everyone's desperate. And desperation makes people clever in all the wrong ways. Here's your oddball fact of the night. In some of the worst houses, patrons were allowed to sleep sitting upright with a rope stretched across the room at chest height. You'd lean forward on the rope and snooze like a drunken marionette. In the morning, the keeper would come through and cut the rope, dropping everyone to the floor in a heap. It was cheaper than a bench, and wildly popular with people who only had a penny or two. You try not to imagine it, but you'll see it for yourself soon enough. There's debate, still, over whether this whole setup was better than nothing. Some scholars claim doss houses were the only thing standing between the poor and certain death. Others argue they were just a slow death, a place where disease, addiction, and misery fermented together until your soul gave up before your body did. You lean toward the second opinion. You lie back again. Close your eyes. Breathe through your mouth. The ceiling groans. The man 2 places down coughs wetly into his sleeve. And somewhere near your foot, a rat scurries, its nails clicking on the wood like morbid castanets. Welcome to night 2. You wake before dawn, though wake is a generous word. More like you regain consciousness after a night of half sleep, twitching in and out of shallow dreams where the walls oozed and the floorboards whispered. Your back screaming, and something's crusted near your mouth, probably dried drool or worse. Around you, the doss house is shifting again, like some massive wheezing organism. Groans, coughs, a few early risers clanking around like miserable clockwork. Someone farts loudly. No one reacts. It's darker than it should be. The candle stubs burned out sometime in the night, and now the only light seeps in through the greasy window panes, a sickly gray smudge of dawn. A fog outside means you can't see far, but you can hear it. Horses clopping past, wheels sloshing through muck, someone shouting about fresh eels. London is always up before you, already churning. You sit up, stretch, and regret it instantly. The muscles in your neck feel like coiled ropes, and your left foot's gone numb from where it was tucked under a stranger's leg all night. You can't remember when you last felt warm or clean. You scratch at your scalp, and come away with something under your fingernail. You don't look. You never look. As the others start to stir, the sounds build, like an orchestra, but one made entirely of sickness and exhaustion. A child begins to cry softly, a wet, defeated sob that gets ignored like the rest. The coughing man, he of the single eye and the Dover shanty, lets out a wheeze that sounds like it might be his final exhale. You glance over. He's still breathing, barely. His lips are tinged purple. There's a puddle of something dark near his bench. You look away. The Doss house isn't haunted in the way ghost stories describe. No flickering specters or rattling chains, just the living, barely. The truly terrifying thing here is how fast people become furniture. You walk past the same slumped shape 3 mornings in a row, then suddenly you're not sure if they're sleeping or dead. The line's blurry, and the keeper doesn't check unless the body starts to smell, or someone complains. That's how they decide if someone's expired, by the stench. You shuffle outside, coat collar high, trying to shake off the night. The air is wet and cold, but at least it's breathable. Your lungs sting with the shift from inside to out, like you've gone from soup to ice water. The streets are quiet this early. Only the truly unfortunate or the truly guilty are out now. You realize you belong to both groups. You find a spot under an awning and watch as the city begins to yawn awake. A milk cart passes, the driver half asleep, lashes crusted with frost. A woman with coal dust on her cheeks marches by with a basket full of rags. You wonder if she's returning from work or heading toward it. Either way, she moves with a kind of purpose you envy. You have nowhere to be. There's no breakfast today, no crust, no stew, not even the gray mush from Stinky Bill. You're too broke. Your stomach growls in protest, but you hush it with a sip from a filthy water pump nearby. It tastes like rust and sorrow, but it's cold. That's something. Eventually, you wander back into the Doss house, hoping for a few more minutes inside before the keeper boots everyone. You pass a woman on the steps, slumped with her shawl wrapped tight. Her feet are bare, blue around the edges. You nudge her gently. No response. A few people glance over but don't stop. You don't either. You can't. If you pause for every corpse in London, you'd never make it to nightfall. Inside, the stink is somehow worse than when you left. Warmed by the body heat of 40 unwashed souls and soaked in the leftovers of everything that dripped, spat, or leaked overnight. You push through toward the rear, near the corner where the rats like to nest. You've decided to stay upright this time. Maybe sleep was overrated. The ghosts of the night haven't left. You hear them in every creak of the floor, every groan of the walls. A woman mutters in her sleep, a string of nonsense syllables that end in a sob. Someone scratches at the doorframe, fingernails rasping wood like claws. The man with the one eye is lying still now. His chest isn't moving. You wonder how long until someone notices. Here's a little slice of Victorian fact to flavor your misery. Many Doss houses were so overcrowded that people literally slept on top of each other, stacked like fish. One record notes lodgers lying shoulder to shoulder, head to foot, packed so tightly that if one turned over, they all had to. That's not an exaggeration. That's geometry. You shift on the bench to relieve a pressure point on your spine, then freeze as a sharp pain jabs your thigh. You reach under your coat and pull out a splinter, a big one, from the bench itself. The place is attacking you now, like it's developed its own malevolent sentience. You can almost believe it. Nearby, a man and a woman argue in hushed tones over something you can't quite make out. You catch bits. Last penny. He promised. Not again. It ends with the woman storming off and the man slumping forward, head in hands. You think about offering him a word, maybe a joke to lighten the mood, but what would you even say? Cheer up, the lice are thriving. better to stay quiet. Here's your fringe fact for the night. Some doss houses were used by criminal gangs as recruitment centers. Think of it, a room full of desperate men, no prospects, no families, no witnesses. The perfect hunting ground for pickpockets, burglars, and worse. If you seem strong enough, or dumb enough, someone might slip you an offer. You haven't been approached yet. That might be a bad sign. Or a worse one. A historical debate still lingers in musty academic halls over whether the government should have done more, whether there should have been regulations, inspections, some effort to clean these places up. Some argue they tried, a little. Others say they turned a blind eye, as long as the poor were quiet and out of sight. It's an old game. Move the problem somewhere dark and let it rot. You lie back again, eyes fixed on the low ceiling. The beams above you are splattered with stains you've stopped trying to identify. You hear a wet cough from across the room. Could be consumption, could be nothing. But if it's something, and you catch it, you'll end up like the man with the one eye, just another still shape on the floor, waiting for the keeper to sniff you out. Sleep doesn't come easy. It never does. But exhaustion always wins, eventually. You drift, hovering between awareness and dreams, until even the stink starts to feel familiar. Almost homey. And that's the worst part. By the time your eyes peel open, the room already reeks of boiled something. Not food exactly. More like someone took food, forgot about it for a week, then reheated it in a boot. You sit up slowly, neck stiff, mouth dry, and stomach twisted in a knot that might be hunger or might be the memory of yesterday's stew. The space around you is in motion again. This place never fully stops moving, even when most of its occupants do. Today, there's a line near the far end of the room, a crude queue forming around what you assume is breakfast. You're torn between curiosity and dread. Your last meal from this place made your insides rebel, but your ribs feel like they're auditioning to burst out of your skin like something from a penny dreadful, so you shuffle toward the smell. The kitchen, if you can call it that, is a back room with a single blackened stove and a tin pot big enough to drown in. No firewood, just a few sputtering coals and smoke so thick it stings your eyes before you even get a look at the pot. The cook, if that's the right term, is a sallow man with eyes like boiled eggs and hands so crusted with grime they look fossilized. He slops something into a chipped bowl and shoves it across the table without looking up. You try not to sniff it too deeply. Mistake number one. The color is an unholy grayish yellow, like gravy that's given up. Chunks of something float near the top, root vegetables, unidentified organs. Your brain is begging you not to find out, but your stomach doesn't care. You take a sip. Immediately regret it. The flavor is confusing. It tastes like onions, yes, but also feet, and maybe soap. Definitely a sour metallic tang underneath everything, like the pot itself is melting into the broth. Still, you finish every drop. There's no such thing as too gross to eat anymore. Hunger's rewired your brain. You now operate under a very different rubric, edible or not immediately fatal. You sit in the corner afterward, trying not to throw up, when someone flops down beside you, a wiry man with a twitchy leg and a smile that screams, "I've stolen at least 3 coats." He gives you a sideways glance and says, "First time in it." You nod. No point pretending otherwise. You still look too hopeful. You haven't fully sagged into the house's rhythm of resignation. He chuckles, scratches his beard, and probably 3 layers of scabs beneath it, and leans closer. Don't get used to the food. If it's not turnip soup, it's bread soaked in gin. That's if they're generous. He scratches again. Once saw 'em make porridge with chalk water, gave half the lot the runs. Other half didn't make it through the night. He's not joking. You learn quickly that the meals here follow a rotation, but not one based on nutrition or variety. It's more like a mood ring made of despair. Whatever's cheapest or discarded from the markets ends up here, boiled beyond recognition. Rumor has it that one of the nearby butchers sells the doss house buckets of floor scraps, bits too grisly even for sausage. It would explain the texture. There's a strange routine to it all. After food, if you're lucky enough to get it, people sit in clusters. Some talk. Some mumble to themselves. Some stare at the wall like it's showing them something only they can see. You stay on the periphery, eyes open, ears sharper. You're learning who to avoid, the ones who pick fights, the ones who steal, the ones who whisper when no one's around, and the ones who smile too wide for no reason. One man in particular stands out, tall, wiry, with a black coat that might have once been military issue. He paces constantly, muttering numbers. Every few steps he turns on his heel like a drill sergeant. No one gets near him. You don't either. Here's a fun historical tidbit to digest while your stomach flips. The government did conduct inspections on some doss houses, mostly to placate critics and the occasional noble bleeding heart. They'd send out a man with a clipboard and a handkerchief over his nose, and he'd check for things like bed cleanliness and adequate ventilation. Of course, most inspections were announced days ahead of time. You can imagine how that went. A quick sweep, a few buckets of cold water tossed around, and suddenly the house was declared fit for habitation. Never mind the lice, or the fact that half the occupants were coughing up blood. And speaking of coughing, someone near the stove lets out a rattle so deep and wet it echoes off the walls. Everyone tenses, but no one moves. Illness spreads here faster than news. You cover your mouth with your sleeve and shift further away, though you're aware it's useless. If it's consumption, what everyone whispers about but no one says out loud, you're probably already infected. It hangs in the air, in the sheets, in the breath of the woman sleeping inches from your boot. It's only a matter of time. There's a bit of comic relief, if you can call it that, when a fight breaks out over a bowl. Two men, both rail-thin and wild-eyed, grab opposite ends and scream obscenities that would make a dock worker blush. One tries to bite the other's nose. They tumble into a heap and the soup flies across the floor, splattering a third man who promptly vomits all over the bench. The keeper finally intervenes, not out of concern, but because the smell is threatening his own comfort. He beats them both out the door with a stick, one still clinging to a spoon. You take this opportunity to shift into the now empty spot near the wall. It's sticky, warm, and probably cursed, but at least it's quiet. You rest your head back and close your eyes, willing your body to process whatever horrors you just consumed. Let's pivot to something weird. Some doss houses offer discounts to those willing to perform. Not in a musical sense, though singing might get you a crust of bread, but in manual labor. You could clean the chamber pots, sweep the floors, or patch holes in the wall for a night's stay. One enterprising owner supposedly let lodgers wrestle rats in the basement for betting money. The winners got a half loaf. The losers, well, they still had dinner. Scholars love to debate whether the Victorian poor were idle or simply unemployable, but you're starting to understand how unhelpful those labels are. Most people here would work if they could find anything that paid more than a stale roll. The problem isn't laziness, it's the trap. Once you're in this life, the cost of escaping it is more than most can afford. Clothes, health, contacts, all the things you no longer have. You doze off for a few minutes somehow, but it's the kind of sleep that leaves you more tired than before. A shallow dive into a nightmare where you were back in your old life, whatever that was, then jolted awake by the cold, or a cough, or someone stepping on your fingers. Another day begins. Another bowl of whatever they can scrape together. Another night on a bench made for torture. You already know this. The routine will crush you if you let it. And yet, you stay. Because outside is worse. You don't mean to make eye contact. But it happens. It's the kind of mistake you make once in a place like this. Accidental, brief, and immediately regrettable. You're sitting near the back wall, staring blankly at a patch of mildew shaped like the British Isles, when a pair of pale, watery eyes lock onto yours. The man they belong to gives you a grin that reveals 2 teeth and a handful of regrets. He starts to shuffle over before you can look away. And just like that, you've been adopted by a doss house regular. He slides in beside you, close enough that you can smell his breath before he says a word. It smells like gin and something dead, possibly him. Name's Cutter, he says. Not a nickname, a confession. He doesn't elaborate. He doesn't need to. You nod politely, which is, of course, mistake number 2. You look new, Cutter says, voice a gravelly rasp like boots on cobblestone. You ain't talked to the old woman yet, have you? You raise an eyebrow. Cutter grins wider. Don't worry, she'll find you soon enough. She always does. She's the one with the foot. You'll know it when you see it. You don't ask what that means. You'll find out, apparently. Everyone talks like that here, in half-clues and ominous mutterings, like the walls are listening and might report back. The doss house is quieter this morning, as if everyone collectively ran out of energy at the same time. You stretch your legs beneath the bench, grateful no one's occupying the space directly across from you. The floor is slick, though, coated in something that might be soup, vomit, or candle wax, possibly all 3. You wipe your hands on your coat and instantly regret that too. There's no clean in here, just levels of dirty. Across the room, 2 young men are arguing. Brothers, maybe. You've seen them before, matching hollow cheeks and matching jackets held together by safety pins in spite. Their voices are low but sharp, and though they keep their fists down, the tension builds like a coiled spring. Cutter watches them too, tilting his head like a cat. 10 Bob says the skinny one wins, he whispers. He fights like he's got nothing left. You don't take the bet. You already know who loses. Anyone nearby. A crash comes a moment later. One of the brothers lunges, knocking over a chair and a tin plate. They tumble to the floor in a blur of elbows and curses. The keeper stomps over, dragging one off by the collar and barking a warning too rehearsed to mean anything. He doesn't care who started it. He just wants quiet. The boys are tossed outside and the door slams shut behind them. Just another morning exorcism. Cutter grunts. Told you. He doesn't collect. You step outside for a breath of freshish air. The fog clings to your skin like sweat, and the sky is an eternal gray slab above. A cart rolls past, carrying a stack of crates stamped "Not Fit for Sale." You wonder if that's where your breakfast came from. The street is more alive now. Hawkers shouting, chimney boys darting between buildings like soot-covered rats, and older women hauling baskets so heavy their arms look like rope. You stay on the fringe, blending in. That's the trick to surviving out here. Don't draw attention. Not from the cops, not from thieves, not even from the kind-hearted. Pity is just a slower way to get robbed. You make your way to a quieter alley behind a fishmonger's shop, hoping for scraps. The stink of fish is eye-watering, but the bin has a few bones with enough meat to nibble on. You're not proud. You're just hungry. A boy half your age tries to muscle in beside you, but you growl without meaning to, and he scampers off. That's new. Apparently you're frightening now, or pathetic enough to look dangerous. Either way, it works. Here's a historical footnote you'll appreciate now that you're gnawing on fish bones like a Dickensian sewer goblin. In Victorian London, the deserving poor, and the undeserving poor were a big thing. If you were sick, elderly, or widowed, society might throw you a crumb. But if you were young and able-bodied, like you were considered lazy, morally suspect. Your hunger was your fault. Your misery earned. Doesn't matter that the factories laid off half their workers. Doesn't matter that the city doubled in size in 2 decades and couldn't house its own labor force. Number. If you're here, it's because you chose badly. You spit out a fish scale and head back toward the house, avoiding a constable making rounds. He doesn't see you. Or he pretends not to. You're neither dangerous nor important. You're just more background noise. Back inside, the Doss house has returned to its baseline filth and mumble. Cutter's gone. In his place sits a young woman with a shrunken face and eyes like scorched earth. Her hair's tucked under a bonnet so stained it's turned a strange brownish green. She holds something bundled in her lap. Maybe a child, maybe laundry, maybe just rags. She doesn't look at you, just rocks slightly, forward and back, like a prayer or a malfunction. You hear someone say her name in passing, Ruthie. You tuck it away. And then, as Cutter predicted, you meet the old woman. She shuffles in from the far end of the room, crooked and bundled in 10 layers of wool and shawls, none of which match. Her face is a roadmap of survival, lines so deep you could get lost in them. But it's the foot you notice, or rather, the thing where her foot should be. It's a club, wrapped in rags, swollen and misshapen, like it belongs to a different body altogether. She walks with a crutch that doubles as a weapon, thumping it loudly as she goes. No one talks when she passes. Some nod. Others look away. She stops in front of you. "You got a name?" she croaks, voice brittle. You hesitate, then lie. "Thomas." She doesn't blink. "Keep it then. Don't leave it on the floor. Someone will take it." She moves on, muttering something about ghosts in the stove. You exhale. Your hands are sweating. Now here's your offbeat historical detail for the day. Certain Doss houses were known for specific populations. One might cater to discharged soldiers, another to women just out of prison, another to foreign dock workers who didn't speak a lick of English. These weren't official designations, more like social gravity. The regulars shaped the culture, and once a place got a reputation, it stuck. You wonder what your house's reputation is. You're afraid you already know, the place where people disappear between coughs. There's still debate over whether any of these places could have been improved without tearing the whole system down. Some reformers pushed for better lighting, for regular cleanings, for separate spaces for men and women. Others said that would just make the poor comfortable, something Victorian society had no interest in. Misery, after all, was supposed to be a lesson, a deterrent. You lie back against the wall and close your eyes. The soup still sloshes in your gut like regret. Your hands are cold, and your feet are beginning to itch again. Another sign the lice are winning. You dream briefly of a bed, a real one, with sheets and silence. Then you wake to someone screaming. The scream isn't the dramatic kind you hear in theater. No blood-curdling echo, no rising strings. It's short, sharp, and strangled. More like someone tried to shout with their mouth full of broken glass. Then comes a scuffle. The clatter of feet and fists. A crash. Someone knocks over a stool. You sit bolt upright, blinking hard, breath catching in your throat like you've swallowed something solid. The Doss house doesn't react like you'd expect. No one screams back. No one gasps. There's no panic. Just the kind of annoyed groans people give when a cartwheel breaks in the road. You scramble to your feet, pushing past bodies and rolled up bundles toward the source of the noise, half out of curiosity, half because your brain still hasn't fully learned to mind its own business. You find the source near the back. A man's hunched over, clutching his leg, while another lodger stands over him, breathing like a winded horse. The attacker's fist is bleeding, knuckles split and dripping. No one steps in. No one asks why. It doesn't matter who started it, not here. The rule is, if you lose, you leave. The keeper appears just in time to enforce it, swinging his stick with a kind of bored efficiency. "Out! Both of you," he grunts, and the injured man's dragged out by his coat collar. The other follows, limping slightly, muttering something in a language you don't recognize. The show's over. People go back to their corners. You return to yours, heart still hammering. The old woman with the club foot shuffles by, eyes narrowed like she saw everything, and intends to file it away for later. She doesn't say a word. You try to sit again, to melt into the bench, but the room feels tighter now, heavier. Like the violence has left something in the air, you itch again. Shoulders, back, thighs. It's not just nerves, it's the infestation. You pull your collar back and glance down. The first one is small, almost innocent looking. A pale, reddish dot crawling along your skin like a drunk explorer. Then another. Then 3 more. Lice. The true tenants of the Doss house. You resist the urge to scratch, knowing once you start, you won't stop. Instead, you stand. Excuse yourself to no one in particular, and head outside into the London gloom. The fog has lifted slightly, revealing the street in all its filthy glory. Cracked cobblestones slick with damp, piles of horse droppings stewing in puddles, and the occasional newspaper blowing like a ghost along the gutter. You spot a trough near a stable and make your way toward it. You don't care if it's meant for animals. You dunk your hands first, then splash water onto your neck and face. It's freezing and foul-tasting, but you keep going, scrubbing your scalp with your fingernails, muttering curses under your breath. You catch your reflection in the puddle beneath the trough. Sunken eyes, cracked lips, hair clumped with oil and dirt. You look exactly how you feel, like something that's been scraped off a wall. Here's a delightful historical fact to liven up your personal hygiene crisis. Delousing in Victorian Doss houses was considered optional. Optional, as in never happens unless an outbreak gets bad enough to attract city inspectors. Inmates at prisons had better chances of getting a bath. Most lodgers dealt with lice by shaving their heads or rubbing vinegar into their scalps. If they had vinegar, you've got neither. Just your fingers and an increasingly violent desire to rip off your own skin. Back inside, the room has settled into something resembling calm again. A man tunes a fiddle with 2 strings near the front, playing the same 4 notes on loop. It should be annoying, but it's oddly soothing. You notice Ruthie again, the girl with the burnt-out eyes, still rocking in place. The bundle in her lap stirs. So, it is a child. You're not sure how you feel about that. You move to sit elsewhere, and in doing so, brush up against a corner of straw bedding. It shifts under your foot, and you realize someone's buried beneath it. Just an arm visible, unmoving. For a moment, you freeze. Watch it. Wait. Then the arm twitches. Not dead, just resting. Maybe. It's hard to explain how sleep works here. It's not rest. It's survival mode, the body briefly shutting down to reboot, ignoring the scratching and the screaming and the threat of being robbed or stabbed in your dreams. You lie still and hope you'll wake up again. That's about it. There's a fringe story that surfaces in the house now and then. A whispered tale about a man who brought in a live pig to sleep next to for warmth. No one knows if it was true or urban legend, but Cutter swears he saw it. The pig snored louder than the man, he once said, shaking his head. But at least the pig didn't steal shoes. You wish you had something that strange to break the monotony. Later in the afternoon, you catch sight of something even stranger. Someone smiling. Not a drunk's grin. A real, honest smile. A middle-aged woman in a torn shawl sits cross-legged near the wall, knitting. She hums quietly. You've no idea how she's even functioning, let alone finding joy. But there it is, needle in hand, ball of yarn tucked into a filthy satchel, and a scarf slowly growing inch by inch. You stare for too long. She notices, offers a nod, doesn't stop humming. You feel embarrassed for staring. You also feel a little warmer. You didn't think that was still possible. Here's your scholarly debate to chew on while picking at invisible lice. Were doss houses simply a grim necessity, or a systemic failure of an empire too proud to admit it had poor people? Some historians argue that the very existence of these places kept people from total collapse, gave them just enough shelter to survive. Others say the doss house culture actually preserved poverty, stalling any real reforms by offering the illusion of support. You look around at the filth, the hunger, the infections walking on two legs, and you know where you stand. You pull your coat tighter, but it doesn't help. The cold comes from the inside these days. You close your eyes and rest your head against the damp brick wall, trying not to think about what's crawling under your collar or what that shadow near the door really is. The bench creaks under your weight, and someone lets out a long, low moan from the other side of the room. Then the coughing starts again. It's coming from near where one eye used to sit. Someone else now. A new cough. But the same ending is written on the wall. The doss house has rules. At least, that's what the sign near the entrance claims. A crooked plank nailed to the wall with big peeling letters: no spitting, no cursing, no fighting, curfew at 9. Clean your place. Every rule, a kind of punchline. Because in practice, no one follows them, and no one enforces them, unless the keeper's in the mood, which is rare and unpredictable as the weather. You notice early on that the only real rule in here is, don't be weak. Weakness gets you ignored at best, stomped at worst. If you're coughing too much, if you cry in your sleep, if you drop your guard for even a moment, someone will take advantage. Might be your blanket, might be your boots, might be something worse. So you learn to walk like you're tougher than you are. Head high, shoulders squared, eyes sharp even when your stomach's trying to digest itself. The posted rules hang there like a joke. No spitting, please. The floor's a patchwork of dried phlegm, blood, and spilled stew. You've seen people spit just to claim a spot. No cursing? That's like telling the Thames not to flow. Every other word in here is a blasphemy, a threat, or a plea twisted into a curse. You heard a man yesterday describe breakfast using language that would give a sailor pause. No fighting? Hilarious. You've seen 3 brawls in 2 days, and the keeper only interfered once, when someone threw a tin cup and it nearly hit his gin bottle. And curfew? Technically, yes, the doors close around 9, but it's not like the house transforms into a peaceful boarding school afterward. That's when the real noise starts. People come in half-soused, hollering nonsense, women crying behind the partition, men muttering in their sleep or shouting at invisible demons. The benches are alive with fidgeting, scratching, grinding teeth. It's not a curfew. It's a lid on a boiling pot. You're starting to understand why some of the older regulars look like carved wood. No expression, no motion, just slumped shapes and coats that haven't come off in a year. You wonder if they still hear the noise, or if their brains have gone somewhere quieter. Maybe that's the only way to survive long term. Mentally move out while your body stays behind. One of the rules, clean your place, is especially funny. What place? There are no assigned spots. You sleep where you can find room. You leave nothing behind unless it's lice or blood. You've tried, once or twice, to brush off your bench or fold your coat just so. It didn't matter. 10 minutes later, someone sits in your exact spot and wipes a greasy hand on the wood. Cleanliness isn't a value here. It's a rumor. Still, you find yourself craving order. Not hygiene necessarily, just rules that mean something. You grew up with some, didn't you? Sit up straight. Don't talk with your mouth full. Say thank you. Now it's don't fall asleep with your boots on. Someone might steal them. Don't eat anything that's still moving. Don't trust the man with the neck tattoo who keeps asking what time you sleep. These are the new commandments. You step outside again for a break from the stench, which clings to your nostrils like tar. The street outside is busy now, midday in full swing. Vendors shout half-heartedly over crates of wilting produce. Children chase each other barefoot through puddles, and a preacher stands on a crate near the corner, shouting about fire and salvation. You watch him for a while, wondering if he's ever spent a night in a place like yours. Probably not. His coat is clean. His shoes match. That disqualifies him. You cross the street and duck into an alley where an old man is selling what he calls miracle drops from a bottle with no label. Says it cures coughs, cleans the blood, and brings a smile to your gut. You ask how much. He says tuppence. You don't have tuppence, but you ask anyway what's in it. He grins. Gin and goose grease. Mostly you nod and walk away before he can upsell it as cologne. Here's a historical footnote for that charming encounter. Victorian London was swimming in quack remedies. Snake oil salesmen made a killing selling so-called elixirs and tonics, many of which were just alcohol, morphine, or flat-out poison. Some were sold in the very doss houses themselves, cheap enough for the desperate, strong enough to dull the misery. People drank them, rubbed them on their skin, gave them to their children. You don't know what's worse, knowing they were fakes or knowing some actually worked, just not in the way anyone intended. When you get back to the house, the keeper is sitting in his usual spot, feet up, sipping from a bottle wrapped in rags. His eyes track you for a second, then lose interest. He's the law here, technically. Enforcer, landlord, warden. But he's more like an overworked ghost, only visible when he wants to be, and dangerous when he gets bored. You've seen him throw out men twice his size just for snoring too loud. You've also seen him ignore a full-on knife fight because it happened near the back and he couldn't be bothered to get up. There's a debate historians like to have about doss house keepers. Were they villains? Victims? Just cogs in a filthy machine? Some say they were heartless opportunists, charging high prices for scraps of floor and looking the other way when things got bad. Others argue they were just as trapped, hated by the city, barely scraping by, and stuck managing misery like it was livestock. You don't have an opinion yet. But if this keeper burst into flames, you probably wouldn't put him out. You take your usual bench. Cutter's not here today. Maybe he moved on. Maybe he got tossed. Or maybe he just finally slept too long. Hard to say. Ruthie's still here, though. The bundle in her lap is quieter now. Smaller, even. She rocks it less. You don't ask. Someone new comes in. A boy, maybe 16, with clean cheeks and eyes that haven't clouded yet. He clutches a satchel like it holds the secrets of the world. He looks around, nose wrinkling, face pale. Everyone sees him, smells the newness. You do too. He'll be lucky if that satchel's still his by morning. You think of warning him, you don't. Here's your quirky fact of the day. Some doss houses had quiet corners, not officially of course, just agreed upon spaces where the elderly or sick would sleep, under the unspoken agreement that no one bothered them. It wasn't kindness. It was survival math. You don't steal from someone who won't last the week. You let them rot in peace and save your energy for people who might fight back. Civilization in its rawest form. Night is still hours away, but the sky already looks tired. So do you. You close your eyes and rest your head against the cold, damp wall, counting every rule on the sign. You think, if just one of them were real, maybe things would be different. You think, they're not. You don't even notice him at first. He's just another shape in the sea of slumped bodies near the hearth, if you can call a barely glowing pile of coals a hearth. The warmth is more psychological than physical. But then he shifts, and you hear the telltale jingle. Not coins, keys, thick iron ones hanging from a belt loop. You glance up. There he is, the doss housekeeper. In daylight, he's easier to see, and somehow that makes him worse. His coat, always buttoned crookedly, has permanent creases where it's never quite been washed, and the elbows shine with grease. His eyes are small, deep-set, constantly darting like he expects someone to stab him, or maybe hopes they will, so he has an excuse to swing that club hanging from his belt. You've seen it used more than once. He keeps it polished, oddly enough. Everything else about him screams decay, but that little wooden baton gleams in the candlelight like a priest's chalice. He doesn't speak unless he has to. He doesn't yell names, doesn't take attendance, doesn't count heads unless someone goes missing and the landlord above demands to know why the rent is short. You've never heard his full name. People call him Keeper, or sometimes that bastard, depending on the mood. You once heard someone call him Governor, but they were drunk and bleeding from the face at the time. There's a quiet myth among the regulars that the Keeper used to be like you. Just another down and outer, sleeping on benches, eating rat-flavored stew. Then one day, the old Keeper died, and he stepped into the role like it was always meant for him. No ceremony, just a transfer of keys and the slow acceptance of power. Not because he was good at it, just because he was the only one still breathing who didn't flinch at the smell. You watch him now as he makes his round, if you can call it that. A meandering loop through the room, checking nothing in particular, just letting people know he's still watching. You hold your breath when he gets near. Everyone does. He stops near a new lodger, a woman with red hair and a nervous twitch in her jaw. She shifts slightly, offering a weak smile, which he does not return. His eyes rest on her longer than they should. Then he moves on. You relax your shoulders. Barely notice you'd tense them in the first place. Here's a grim historical tidbit that will make your skin crawl more than the lice do. In several documented cases, doss housekeepers doubled as informants for the police. For the right price, or the right grudge, they'd point out which lodger had a knife hidden, who was part of a gang, who might have been seen near a crime scene. Sometimes they got a cut of the reward money. Sometimes they just wanted someone gone. And in a place like this, where everyone blends into the moldy wallpaper, it only takes a whisper to disappear someone permanently. You've noticed the Keeper doesn't sleep here. Not like the rest of you. He has a back room, separated by a door you've never seen open. Rumors say it's where he keeps his real bed, sheets and all, and a stash of food better than what the rest of you eat. No one's ever confirmed it. No one dares peek. That door is sacred, touched only by him and once by a rat who didn't make it back out. You do your best to stay invisible when he's near, not in an obvious way. You don't shrink. That's how you draw attention. No, you sit still, don't look him in the eye, and give off the energy of someone too boring to notice. So far it's working, but not everyone shares your survival instincts. Late in the evening, after another bowl of tasteless broth has gone down like warm pond water, A boy near the stove gets bold. He's maybe 15, skinny, with dirty blonde hair and too much optimism. You've seen him trading buttons and scraps of wire for pennies. He's clever in that doomed way. Tonight, he struts up to the keeper like he's about to ask for a raise in a job he doesn't have. "Sir," he says, loud enough to hush half the room, "we're out of straw in the corner again. Roof's leaking too. Think you could—" He never finishes the sentence. The club swings out so fast it whistles. It catches him in the gut, knocks him flat. The boy wheezes, curls up like a dying spider, eyes wide in shock. "Tell someone who cares," the keeper mutters, already walking away. No one helps the boy. Not because they're heartless, but because they're smart. The last person who jumped in ended up with a busted cheekbone and an invitation to sleep outside for a week. You wait until the keeper disappears back into his room before crawling over and nudging the boy. He's still breathing, just less enthusiastically. "You'll live," you whisper. Not a comfort, just a fact. He doesn't answer, but he grabs your hand briefly, then lets go. You sit back down in your corner and try to pretend it didn't happen. That's what everyone else is doing. But the image of the club swinging out, clean and casual, sits in your skull like a branding iron. Here's your oddball fringe fact of the night. Some keepers didn't just run doss houses. They ran rackets, pawn operations, backroom gambling, even matchmaking services for men looking to buy a night of companionship. In the worst places, women weren't just lodgers. They were inventory. You don't know if your keeper is part of anything like that. But you've noticed certain women get let in without paying, and they don't stay in the main room. You hear them leave again hours later, moving slow, like something in them's been scraped out. There's debate in the dusty corners of academia about how much power these keepers really had. Some say they were trapped, too, under pressure from landlords, city inspectors, and criminals. Others believe they ruled their turf like petty kings, building empires from the bones of the poor. You're leaning toward the latter. Empathy's a luxury that doesn't last long here, especially not when you hold the keys. The keeper's back room door creaks shut, and silence falls. Not peace, just the kind of quiet that settles when fear is the loudest thing left. You try to sleep. The bench is harder than ever. Your head aches. The stew's turning in your belly like it's trying to escape. But worst of all is the memory of that club and the way it moved, like it had a mind of its own. You realize something else as you drift. You're not afraid of dying in this place. You're afraid of living long enough to end up like him. You don't plan to get evicted. No one does. It's not the kind of thing you schedule. One moment, you're dozing on your usual plank, chin tucked into your coat, the rhythm of hacking coughs and scratching mice lulling you into something like sleep. And the next, a boot kicks your side and a voice barks your name, or at least the name you gave them. Thomas. It's the keeper. You know that voice, that tone that means something's about to hurt. You open your eyes slowly, trying not to move too fast. You've learned sudden movements only invite more attention, and attention here is a currency with interest. The keeper looms over you like a chimney, soot-stained and collapsing inward. He's not shouting, but he doesn't need to. Everyone's watching now, pretending not to. "You're late," he mutters, tapping the club against his thigh like it's an afterthought. "Payment was due at dusk." You blink. You thought you had another night left. Your coin's still warm in your pocket, thumbed 1,000 times in the past hour. It's the last one you've got. You start to reach for it, but he's already shaking his head. "Too late," he says. "I gave your spot to someone else." You try to protest. Quietly, respectfully, because you're not stupid. You explain you were going to pay, that you still have the sixpence, see? It's right here. He doesn't even look at it, just gestures toward the door. Out. And that's it. No negotiation, no refund policy, no appeals. The rules are arbitrary, enforced at the whim of a man who's lost all concept of fairness. And you knew that. You knew. But you thought, just maybe, this time. You gather your bundle, what's left of it, and step outside. The door slams behind you like a coffin lid. London greets you with cold fingers. Rain. Of course, not a torrential downpour, just a steady, sideways drizzle that soaks in immediately and stays. Within minutes, your shoulders are drenched. Your boots squelch with every step. You tug your coat tighter, but the wind finds the holes like it knows them personally. It's the kind of night where even the rats are sheltering in place. You head toward the alley behind the Doss house, where a few unlucky souls already huddle. There's no cover, just a stone wall and some broken crates. You recognize two of them, an old man who once offered you half his bread crust, and a girl who never speaks and stares at her hands like there's something foreign. They barely acknowledge you. Misery here is a private affair. You tuck yourself into a corner and sit on a step. The stone is slick and unforgiving. Water trickles down your back like it's trying to make a home between your vertebrae. You curl your legs in, pull your coat over your knees, and try to disappear into yourself. Now's a good time for a historical fact to keep your spirits up, right? Eviction from a Doss house wasn't unusual. Sometimes it happened because you couldn't pay. Other times, because the keeper just didn't like the look of you. There were no receipts, no contracts, no safety net. Once you were out, you were out. Your belongings, at risk, your spot, immediately filled. Someone could sit where your body was still warm and not blink twice. You last about 2 hours before your teeth start chattering. It's not just the cold, it's the wind, the wet, the way your body seems to fold inward, trying to protect your insides from your outsides. You try to sleep, but every sound jerks you awake. The scuffle of boots, the rattle of a cartwheel, a drunk shouting at ghosts. There's no rest here, just waiting for the next bad thing. You debate your options. There's always the tannery. Sometimes they take on night laborers. The pay is wretched, and the work smells like death, but it's warm. Or at least warmer than this. You tell yourself you'll go at first light. But that means surviving the night. Someone else joins your alley. A boy, small, maybe 9 or 10, dragging a sack twice his size. He finds a dryish patch near the wall and curls up without a word. You wonder where his parents are. Then remind yourself that asking questions like that here is a form of self-harm. By dawn, your fingers are numb. Your coat is soaked through. You've barely slept. And now you have to decide. Try again at another Doss house with your last coin, or gamble on work. You stare at the silver in your palm. It looks lighter than it did yesterday. Or maybe you've just aged 10 years overnight. Here's something on the fringe to consider. Some Doss house evictees faked illness to get a night in the charity wards. Not always a good idea. Sometimes they kept you, locked you in, treated you like a specimen instead of a person. But still, it beat the cold. Some even faked madness for a stay in the asylum, where beds and food, while horrible, were at least consistent. Risky, though. Hard to prove you were sane once you'd said you weren't. You walk the streets until your feet burn. The tannery doesn't take anyone today. Says they're full up. A soup kitchen turns you away before noon. They're out of bread. The fog rolls in thick around midday, and with it comes a hopelessness so heavy it settles in your bones. You pass by a shop window and catch your reflection. Wet, hunched, sunken eyes that look bruised. You wonder if you'd recognize yourself in daylight. And now You've made a full circle. Back to where you started, back to the Doss House steps, clutching the same sixpence, soaked to the skin and dizzy from hunger. You hate yourself for coming back, for hoping the keeper might have a scrap of compassion or forget he kicked you out. But he doesn't, and he hasn't. Full, he says, without looking up from his bottle. You don't argue. Just turn away and shuffle down the street, boots squishing, mouth bitter. So this is what eviction feels like. It's not a scream or a door slammed in your face. It's quieter, colder. It's the slow realization that you've become the kind of person no one wants to share floor space with. And the city just keeps moving. You don't plan to sleep under a bridge either. It just sort of happens. Like everything else lately, you wander long enough, with feet blistered and knees locked from cold, and eventually the city pushes you into its lowest crevice. This one is off Commercial Road, beneath a stone arch stained black by decades of coal smoke and horse piss. The river's not far, close enough that the air stinks of low tide, rot, and the chemical tang of factories upstream. You settle on a dry patch of ground, dry being a generous term, and lean your back against the wall, trying to remember what your spine felt like before it became part of the architecture. You're not alone, of course, never are. The bridge is already claimed by a handful of others who, like you, couldn't scrape together sixpence or had the misfortune of offending the wrong keeper. You exchange no names, no greetings. There's a shared agreement here. Pretend each other doesn't exist unless absolutely necessary. It's safer that way. You curl into yourself, coat pulled tight, chin tucked down. Your hands are too cold to feel anything. You try to keep your feet off the wet spots. There's a drip from above, steady, rhythmic. You can't tell if it's water or something worse. You try not to think about rats, but you know they're there. You hear them, scampering through the rubbish and darting between shadows. One runs over someone's boot and gets swatted away. It squeals. The person doesn't even flinch. You drift in and out of sleep, if you can call it that. Your dreams are fractured, full of chasing and falling and cold teeth biting into your skin. You wake once to the sound of footsteps, heavy, measured. A constable. A pair of them, actually. Lanterns swinging, truncheons at their belts. They don't speak. Just shine the light down under the bridge, eyes scanning, faces unreadable. One of them nudges your foot with the tip of his boot. You blink up at him. No loitering, he says flatly. You want to laugh, but your jaw aches from clenching. Instead, you nod and pull your legs in tighter. After a moment, they move on, leaving the stink of oil and indifference behind them. Here's a little historical morsel to chew on while you pretend your fingers haven't turned blue. London police in the 19th century often doubled as unofficial social control. They weren't just there to stop crime. They were there to keep the poor invisible. If you were sleeping in the wrong place, making too much noise, looking too destitute in the wrong neighborhood, they could fine you, beat you, or simply encourage you to move along with the tip of a boot. You weren't a citizen. You were a nuisance. Hours pass. You don't remember sleeping, but you must have. When you next open your eyes, the sky's a milky gray, and the fog has thickened to a soup so dense it muffles the city's sounds. The bridge drips steadily. Someone's snoring. Another's coughing. And your legs are so stiff you're not sure you'll be able to stand. You try anyway. It takes longer than it should. Every joint protests. But eventually, you're upright, swaying slightly, eyes burning. Your stomach roars. It's been, what, 2 days since the last real food? Maybe 3? Hard to keep track. Hunger's no longer sharp. It's dull now, heavy, like a rock in your gut. You shuffle back into the city, eyes scanning for any opportunity, legal or otherwise. There's a cart up ahead carrying fresh bread, and for a brief, dangerous moment, you think about grabbing a loaf and running, but you don't. Not because it's wrong, not even because you might get caught. You don't do it because you're too tired. That's what poverty really does. It doesn't just starve you. It breaks you down until you don't even have the energy to survive. Eventually, you find a pump behind a butcher's stall. The water's freezing and tinged red, probably from all the meat. But it's something. You drink until your belly sloshes, then wash your face. It stings, but it wakes you up. Sort of. A boy, maybe 12, watches you from across the alley. He's got a sharp face and sharper eyes. "Got a place to sleep tonight?" he asks, casual as anything. You shake your head. He nods, then tilts his chin toward a row of crates near the docks. Sometimes you can sneak in there before the workers show up. If you don't snore. You follow him without thinking. The crates are stacked high, full of rope and canvas. You crawl behind one and nestle into a corner. It's better than under the bridge. Not by much, but enough. Later that day, a porter catches you and throws you out by the collar. You land hard, scrape your elbow, and lose the coin that was in your pocket. When you look back, it's gone. You don't even know if someone took it or if it simply vanished into the cracks. Either way, it's gone. Here's your odd fringe fact of the day. Some of the poor took to disguising themselves to get access to better sleeping arrangements. A clean shirt, a well-timed lie, a borrowed child. You'd be surprised what could get you into a charity shelter or even a boarding school's coal room for the night. There were entire informal markets around this deception. Borrowed respectability, some called it. Rent a cravat. Sleep indoors. You consider trying something like that. But again, too tired, too worn out. You're not clever enough when you haven't eaten. Not brave enough when your bones feel hollow. That night you find yourself on the move again. Not toward the Doss house. That door's closed to you now, at least for the time being. Instead, you curl up on the step of a closed shop, half covered by an awning and ignored by passers-by. You're invisible, but not safe. A drunk stumbles past and mutters something about filthy dogs. You pull your coat tighter and pray he keeps walking. Here's your debate to ponder as the cold seeps in. Did the Victorians criminalize poverty, or were they just overwhelmed by it? Some historians say the sheer volume of destitute people, thousands pouring into the city each year, was too much for any system to handle. Others argue that the systems in place were designed to fail, so the rich could wash their hands of guilt. You can't tell who's right. But right now, lying on stone steps in yesterday's rain, it sure feels like someone decided this was your fault. You close your eyes and try to imagine warmth, a fire, a bed, a door that doesn't slam in your face. Instead, you get drizzle, footsteps, and that creeping thought that the bridge might have been better after all. The second you see the Doss house again, something inside you folds up like wet paper. You'd told yourself you wouldn't come back. Swore as you lay curled on that shop stoop, listening to boots clatter by all night, that you'd find somewhere, anywhere, else. That this place, with its sour air and lice-ridden benches and unwritten law of indifference, would never see you again. But you're back. Because that's what happens when London wins. It doesn't beat you with violence. It doesn't scream. It just waits. Waits until you've got nothing left but hope that smells like mildew and costs sixpence. You approach with caution, shoulders hunched. Not because you're cold, though you are, but because you're ashamed. Like returning to an ex you swore off, but who still has your name memorized and a drawer full of your socks. The building looks smaller this time, or maybe you look bigger. stretched thinner by nights outside. Either way, it's less imposing and more like an open mouth, ready to swallow. The keeper is at the desk, of course, polishing his club with a rag that might once have been a shirt. His eyes flick up as you enter, and for a split second, you see something familiar. Recognition? Disdain? Doesn't matter, he knows you. You hand him your last sixpence, silently, no eye contact. He takes it without a word and points his chin toward the benches. You're allowed back in, and somehow that feels worse than being kicked out. You pass a few familiar faces. Ruthie's still here, the bundle in her lap now frighteningly still. Her eyes are hollow, more than before. Cutter's gone, replaced by a barrel-chested man who smells like formaldehyde and hums lullabies under his breath. The fiddler, with the two-string instrument, plays softly near the stove again, the same 4 notes over and over, like he's casting a spell to keep the building upright. The air, if possible, has evolved into something new, thicker, denser. There's been rain, and everything's damp. The wood, the straw, the bodies, every surface feels sticky. The scent of mildew has teamed up with something meatier now, something like boiled feet. Someone, somewhere in the room, has begun rotting. You take your bench, your usual one, like a dog returning to its vomit. It hasn't improved with time. The boards dig into your back like accusations. You sit slowly, ignoring the itch behind your knee and the faint crawling sensation in your collar. You're too tired to care. And that's when you meet the new low, a worse doss house. You hadn't thought it possible, but here it is. The change happened while you were gone. Maybe the keeper raised the price and let in a rougher crowd. Maybe the rain flushed more of the desperate inside. Maybe Cutter was the glue holding things together, and with him gone, the house has started to collapse under its own filth. The benches are overfilled. People are sitting on the floor now, backs against each other for warmth. A child screams in a back corner and gets a muffled shush, not from the mother, but from someone trying to sleep. A man with no shoes and blackened toes babbles to himself near the window. He's got a rat in a tin cup, calls it Charlie, talks to it like a priest. You blink slowly, try to recalibrate. The rope room is full tonight. That's new. You hear them through the thin walls, soft snoring, the occasional thump when someone falls forward off the rope. You make a mental note to try it sometime. A penny for the privilege of hanging off a hemp line like a coat. That's the next level of misery. Here's a solid historical footnote to file under depressingly real. As London's population exploded in the 19th century, so did the competition for even the worst accommodations. Doss houses weren't just shelters, they were marketplaces. You didn't pay for comfort, you paid for permission to breathe indoors. And when demand outpaced supply, prices went up, even when conditions worsened. Supply and demand meet mildew and dysentery. You shift slightly to make room for someone else who's decided your spot is also their spot. There's no arguing. There's barely enough room to sneeze. You keep your arms tucked tight and your boots pressed together, hoping they'll still be on your feet when you wake up. A man near the hearth begins singing. Not a shanty this time. Something mournful. Irish, maybe. It cuts through the stink like a knife. Beautiful in a way that feels insulting. Beauty doesn't belong here. It's like hearing a church bell in a slaughterhouse. Still, no one stops him. You close your eyes and try not to fall asleep. Not yet. Not until you're sure the floor's not going to collapse. Not until the moaning in the corner dies down. Not until the rat near the stove finishes whatever grim business it's up to. Not until your body gives you no other choice. Someone coughs behind you. Deep, guttural, wet. Of course. You turn your head slightly, just enough to spot the source. A man curled on his side, face slick with sweat, chest rising in hitching motions. He's new, pale. You've seen this before. Everyone has. Consumption, or something like it. He shouldn't be here. Should be in a hospital, or at least out in the air. But those places cost more than sixpence, and don't take men like him anyway. You catch Ruthie watching him too. Her eyes flick between the man and her bundle, then back again. She knows what this is. She's seen it before. Maybe more than once. You suddenly remember a rumor you heard months ago that some doss houses encourage the sick to stay. Something about death meaning an unclaimed body, which could then be sold. Not to the undertaker, but to the surgeons, the med students, the bone men, payment for the dead. You try to laugh it off, but it gets stuck somewhere in your throat. Your quirky fact of the night: certain unscrupulous doss housekeepers were accused of selling corpses to medical schools. Hard to prove, easy to whisper. One famous case involved a keeper who kept a ledger, not of rent, but of deaths. Cross-reference with coin payments from anatomy schools. Allegedly. No one could make it stick. You press your back into the bench and try not to think about it. It's raining again. You hear it tapping on the roof, slow and steady. Not enough to flood, just enough to remind you that the world outside is just as cold and cruel as the one in here. There's a final thought that bubbles up as you drift off, head lolling forward, the stink of the room finally dulling into a kind of background static. You think, maybe this is the better doss house. And that's the scariest thought of all. Work, when it comes, doesn't arrive with a handshake or a promise. It crawls up to you the way mold spreads across bread. Slow, gray, and slightly offensive. You hear about the tannery job from a man with a missing thumb who overhears you cursing your empty stomach under your breath. He tells you, between slurps of broth, that a place down by the docks is taking on laborers. Temporary, day by day. No questions, no names, no paperwork. Just show up before dawn and hope they don't turn you away. He grins, revealing a set of teeth that look like old gravestones. They'll feed you if you don't die before lunch. It sounds perfect. You leave the doss house before the keeper starts his rounds, slipping through the door like you've done something illegal. The streets are still soaked from last night's rain, and a thick morning mist hangs low, turning everything into vague outlines. You know this city better by smell now. Bakeries you can't afford, sewage you can't escape, and the acidic sting of coal smoke in your throat. The tannery is exactly where the thumbless man said it would be, wedged between two warehouses that smell like pickled despair. You approach slowly, wary of being told to sod off, but no one guards the gate. You follow the stench instead, and the stench does not disappoint. It's worse than the doss house, genuinely, a new depth of nasal suffering. Imagine a pile of skinned animals left to sun-dry for a week and then soaked in stale urine and lime. That's what tanneries do, after all. Strip flesh from hide using chemicals, dung, and whatever else turns something dead into leather. You gag once and try to hide it. A man nearby snorts without looking up. First day, is it? You nod, not trusting your throat to work properly. He points to a stack of hides and says, "Start there. Keep your mouth shut, hands moving, and maybe they'll let you live through it." And so you begin. Your job is simple, in theory. Move hides from the lime pits to the drying racks. That's it. But the hides are slick, heavy, and stink like betrayal. The lime burns your skin through your shirt. The floor is coated in a film of death slime that makes every step a gamble. The air is thick with a smell so persistent it seems to crawl inside your nostrils and set up shop. You gag again. Someone laughs. You keep working. Time doesn't pass in hours here. It passes in layers of filth. You start clean. Relatively. And by mid-morning, you're soaked through with sweat, rot, and whatever ancient fluids live in the vats. Your fingers wrinkle. Your back aches. The inside of your mouth tastes like copper. But at midday, they hand you a biscuit, stale and hard as a roof tile, but real food. Then a slice of meat. Questionable in origin, unseasoned, overboiled, but it fills your gut like it means business. You chew slowly, carefully, not from manners, but because your jaw doesn't want to move anymore. Here's a historical footnote to honor your suffering. Victorian tanneries were among the most hazardous places to work in the city, with exposure to harsh chemicals, airborne bacteria from rotting flesh, and a near constant risk of infection. Most workers didn't last long. Some went blind. Some went mad from the fumes. But for those on the very edge like you, it was a lifeline. A miserable, scalding, skin-stripping lifeline. The man beside you, covered in the same filth and dried sweat, tells you this is his third week. "I don't smell it anymore," he says deadpan. "Means it's in my blood now." You can't tell if he's joking. You assume he's not. You keep at it until sunset. No breaks beyond lunch. No words beyond necessity. Just the slap of hides, the slosh of fluids, the groan of wooden racks being hauled into position. Your muscles scream at you, but you ignore them. You've been hungry too long to care about comfort. At the end of the day, a foreman drops a coin into your palm. A sixpence, cold, dull, and beautiful. You stare at it like it's holy. You're too tired to smile. But for the first time in days, you feel something like hope. A dangerous, fleeting thing. You don't go back to the bridge. You go back to the doss house. The keeper takes your coin without a word. No sneer, no bark. Maybe your new stink masks your old one. Maybe you're just another shape in the growing pile. You find your usual bench and collapse into it, sore and soaked to the bone in chemicals that probably have 12-letter names. The other lodgers give you a bit more space tonight. Your odor earns you a sort of respect, or distance at least. You scratch absently at your forearm and notice a faint red burn. The lime. It's already eating your skin. You'll need to find vinegar or something to neutralize it, eventually. Right now, you can't move, not even to cough. Here's your fringe fact to spice up the rot. Some workers in Victorian tanneries were paid partially in meat. Not prime cuts, of course. Offal, necks, kidneys, whatever was left after the good parts were sold. Most didn't ask questions. Hunger beat out curiosity every time. Sometimes the meat was from animals. Sometimes, well, best not to ask. As you settle into your bench, too exhausted to even pull your coat tighter, someone near the stove starts humming again. Same song as last night, the Irish one. You don't know the words, but your brain fills in the gaps. It feels like morning. Or maybe victory. Maybe both. You drift off faster this time. Your body's spent, and your brain's too blistered to form objections. The stink of the tannery clings to your skin, your hair, your soul. But you earned this stink. You paid for this bench. With your back. With your hands. With your nose, which may never recover. And somehow, that makes all the difference. By morning, the cough has found you. It starts with a dry tickle in your throat, harmless enough, almost an afterthought, until it doesn't stop. You wake choking, bent double on the bench with your mouth hanging open, hacking like your lungs are trying to leap out and escape without you. The man next to you shuffles away with the same urgency as someone avoiding a collapsing wall. You spit into your sleeve and hope it's just dust. But there's a thickness to it, a heat in your chest. Not good. You try to ignore it. You've ignored worse. A cough's just noise after all. Your body's tired, that's all. Tired and soaked in the tannery's chemical stew. You'll sweat it out, walk it off. But the seed's been planted, and you know exactly what it looks like when it flowers. You've seen the others. The ones who start with a little throat clearing, a sniffle, and by the end of the week are doubled over, blood in the corners of their mouths, ribs poking out like broken piano keys. They always think they'll get better. None do. You stand slowly, every muscle groaning in protest. Outside, London is wrapped in fog so thick it feels like walking through someone else's exhale. The cobblestones are slick with frost. The gutters running with black water and rotted leaves. You shove your hands into your coat and start the walk toward the tannery again. The sixpence sits in your pocket, hard and reassuring. One more day of work means one more night indoors. That's the trade. But the moment you step through the tannery gate, something's different. Fewer men, less shouting. The stink's still there. God, is it ever? But the motion's slowed. A man near the vat catches your eye, shakes his head. Too many sick, he says. City inspectors. Sent 3 of them to the fever wards. You blink. So, we're not working? He shrugs. Some are. Not you. Too many new faces already. Come back next week, maybe. You want to argue, but what would you say? That your lungs still mostly work? That you're only a little sick? That you're starving and will die before Friday if you don't get back in that pit of hide and rot? You don't say anything. You turn and walk away. Sixpence still in your pocket, but now utterly useless. One more coin doesn't matter if there's no work tomorrow, or the next day, or ever again. That cough, it doesn't care either way. It follows you down the street like a stray dog, always a few steps behind, waiting for your guard to drop. You pass a bakery and nearly fall to your knees. The smell, fresh bread, warm sugar, actual butter, wraps around your face like a warm hand. Your stomach lurches. You consider spending the sixpence just for a bite. But you already know how the math works. No bed, no roof. One loaf of bread won't keep your ribs from freezing when night falls. So you move on, coughing into your coat sleeve, throat raw and eyes watering. A woman walking by crinkles her nose and veers sharply away, clutching her handbag like it's her last defense. You want to tell her not to worry. Disease is democratic. Everyone gets a turn. You make your way back toward Whitechapel. The Doss house is there, waiting for you, its walls sagging and its windows blinking with candlelight. You pause at the threshold, suddenly unsure. Do you really want to go back in there, with the fever wrapping around your lungs like ivy? But what's the alternative? Another night under a bridge will likely finish you. You need rest, dryness, any form of warmth. So you go in. The keeper doesn't even look at you this time, just holds out his hand like a toll collector on a very short, very cursed road. You drop the sixpence into his palm and keep your eyes down. He doesn't speak. You take your bench. The room feels smaller tonight, closer. The walls seem to breathe with you, and you don't like how in sync they are. Ruthie is gone. So is her bundle. No one says anything. No one mentions it. You're not even sure anyone noticed. But her corner is empty now. Just a blackened stain on the floor and the faint sour smell of old milk. Across the room, the man with the rat in the tin cup, Charlie, remember, is whispering again. But not to Charlie this time. To the air. To someone who isn't there. You realize he hasn't been feeding the rat. You realize the rat hasn't moved in 2 days. Someone lights a candle too close to the wall, and the soot leaves a jagged scar on the plaster. Someone else is sobbing softly under a blanket. You try to sleep. You can't. You cough again, and this time, there's blood. Just a bit. Just a fleck on your lip. But enough. Here's your historical footnote for tonight. Tuberculosis, known then as consumption, killed tens of thousands in 19th century London. It was the silent predator in places like this, spreading through shared air and shared benches, touching everyone eventually. People called it the romantic disease because of the way it made you pale, tragic, thin. That's the poetry of the privileged. For the poor, it was hacking up blood and being thrown out before you infected the others. You wipe your mouth and glance around, wondering if anyone saw. You're not sure what's worse, that they didn't, or that they did and simply didn't care. Here's your strange, dark fringe fact of the night. Some desperate souls faked consumption just to be taken in by charity hospitals. Beds, warmth, broth, and sometimes even morphine. But once inside, if they were found out, they were turned away. If they weren't, well, sometimes they got what they pretended to have. Sometimes pretending was enough to make it real. You think about doing the same, pretending to be sicker than you are, though the line is blurry now. Are you pretending, or already halfway in the grave? The man next to you shifts in his sleep and mutters something you don't understand. His breath smells of rot. He's sweating through his coat. You wonder if he's sick too. You wonder how many of you are. And the scariest part? No one's going to come stop it. No inspectors, no doctors, not until someone drops, and even then, they'll just shove the body outside and sweep the corner for lice. The bench will be filled by sunset. Probably already is. You curl in on yourself, clutching your ribs. Try to breathe without coughing. Try to sleep without dreaming. Try to survive just one more night. You wake to stillness. That's the first sign something's wrong. Silence in a place like this is never natural. No coughing, no groaning, no muttered threats or scratching noises. Just a dull, heavy quiet, as if the air itself has been soaked in sleep. Then you notice the smell, even thicker than usual, sweet and sour all at once, like iron and rot cooked together in the damp. You sit up slowly, your breath clouding faintly in the morning chill. The light leaking through the cracked window is gray-blue. Not quite day yet. You know before you even see him. The man across from you, the one who coughed all night, isn't moving. He's lying on his side, eyes half open, mouth slack. You wait for the chest to rise. It doesn't. You stare for a long minute, hoping you're wrong, hoping he's just in that half-dead stupor everyone falls into here. But no, the flies have found him. They move in slow, confident spirals around his mouth. No one reacts, not even the keeper, who sits at his post sipping gin and pretending the room isn't down one occupant. It's not cruelty, exactly. It's routine. You realize, with a dull sort of awe, that this happens all the time. A body becomes background. Death is housekeeping. You should feel something, shock, fear, sadness, but all you feel is tired. You stare until the image burns into your eyelids, then stand and step over him. The floor creaks, and your boots leave faint wet prints. You're half expecting someone to stop you, to say something, but they don't. The doss house carries on. The fiddle starts up again, a broken tune looping endlessly. The air tastes like dust and endings. A little later, when the keeper finally rises to deal with it, he doesn't call for help, doesn't even flinch. He grabs the man's ankles and drags him across the floorboards, the body leaving a faint trail of damp behind. The sound, wood, skin, wood, skin, sticks in your head like a drumbeat. You turn away before the keeper reaches the back door where the refuse goes out. You hear it close. That's that. Here's your historical fact of the morning, since we're pretending this is educational. Coroners rarely visited doss houses unless someone important asked questions. Most deaths were unrecorded, buried without names, sometimes even without boxes. The dead were often stripped of clothing first, which was washed and rented out again by the keeper. cheap laundry service by way of mortality. Nothing wasted. You lean against the wall, fighting the cough clawing at your throat. Every breath rasps. The inside of your chest feels like it's been lined with sandpaper. You press your hand against your sternum and imagine the infection spreading, blooming like mold. The thought makes you dizzy. You might be next. And still, you don't move. Eventually, hunger wins over dread. You shuffle outside into the cold, where the rain has stopped but left the puddles that reflect the gray sky like unclean mirrors. A cart rolls by, wheels splashing muck onto your trousers. You don't even bother wiping it off. You make your way toward the alley near Stinky Bill's cart, praying he's open, praying you've got enough in your pocket for something vaguely edible. He is open. The smell hits you before you even see him. Boiled vegetables, sweat, and despair. He ladles you a bowl of whatever's simmering today. It looks like wet sawdust and cabbage. You give him a coin, something smaller than a sixpence, maybe one of the last you've got. He doesn't look up, just mutters, "Careful now, hot." You nod, take the bowl, and sit on a curb that's slick with grime. The first mouthful burns your tongue. You don't care. The heat feels alive. You shovel it in, ignoring the texture, ignoring the taste, until you hit something hard. You stop, fish it out with a finger. A bone. Chicken, maybe. Or rat. You flick it away and keep eating. You'll worry about what it was later. Maybe never. You think about the man from this morning. You wonder what the keeper does with the bodies. The thought refuses to leave. You've heard stories of wagons at night, of men in aprons lifting shapes covered with rags, of the way they're gone by dawn. Sold to the surgeons, the rumor says. The doss houses get a few coins for each cadaver. Science gets its specimen. Everyone profits except the deceased. Here's your fringe fact of the day. In the 1800s, the demand for cadavers for anatomy schools was so high that body snatching became a profitable trade. When supply ran short, some snatchers stopped waiting for people to die. The line between collector and murderer blurred dangerously. Burke and Hare, you might remember, made a fortune killing their victims in Edinburgh just decades earlier. And London learned fast. The poor were both invisible and plentiful. Perfect merchandise. You swallow the last of your soup and feel it sit like a stone in your gut. Your breath steams faintly in the chill. You cough again, this time wetter, deeper. There's a speck of red on your palm when you pull it away. You stare at it, wipe it on your coat. No one around you notices. No one ever does. You go back inside before nightfall, partly to avoid the cold, partly because you don't know where else to go. The keeper doesn't even glance up this time. The benches are rearranged, slightly fewer now. Your usual one is still free. You sit. Try not to think about why. Someone mutters near the stove. The fiddler's gone, replaced by the hum of flies near the corner where the body used to be. The air's thicker than usual. Sweat and mildew and something underneath, an undertone you can't quite name, like rust, but heavier. You realize what it is and wish you hadn't. You shift your weight and stare at your hands, pale and cracked. You used to have fingerprints. Now, you just have stains. Historians like to argue about when the Great Sanitation movement began, when London decided to start caring about filth, disease, and death. Some say it was after the cholera outbreaks, when the city finally realized sewage running through the streets wasn't ideal. Others say it was when the middle class started noticing the smell. But sitting here now, breathing this air, you can't help thinking the movement came too late for anyone who mattered. You close your eyes, leaning your head against the damp wall. You listen to the creaks, the whispers, the drip from the ceiling. You think about the man who died this morning and whether anyone will remember him tomorrow. The answer is simple. They won't. You don't go looking for the voices behind the wall. They come looking for you. It starts as a whisper. Not eerie, not ghostly, just human. Soft and broken, like the sound of someone trying not to be heard and failing. It seeps in from the other side of the thin plank barrier that divides the main room from the women's quarters, if you can call it that. There's no real wall, just a few warped boards nailed up in haste, offering neither privacy nor silence. You've walked past it 100 times, never daring to look too closely. But tonight, as you lie on your side with your head pressed to the wall, too tired to move and too cold to sleep, you hear them. One voice first, then another. It's late. Most are asleep or pretending, but these women are still awake. One is sobbing quietly, not the loud kind that invites attention, but the kind you try to swallow. It's followed by a murmur from someone older, her words too soft to make out, spoken like someone has said them many, many times before. You hold still, barely breathing, not out of malice, just because you don't want to interrupt. The sobbing turns into a broken sentence. He said, he'd marry me. Once I... Another voice cuts in, sharper. That's what they all say. A third voice. Did you get your penny at least? A pause, then half. There's no outrage, no gasps. Just the sound of someone lighting a match, the scratch against stone, a faint flicker of flame. Someone exhales. The smell of old tobacco curls through the cracks in the boards. Then silence again. You turn onto your back, staring up at the ceiling. The old beams look ready to fall in. One of them is leaking slowly. You feel a drop land near your temple and leave it there, too exhausted to wipe it away. Here's your historical reality check, as if you needed one. Many doss houses segregated men and women, but only half-heartedly. There were women's sides, sometimes separate rooms or floors, but rarely were there proper locks or guards. And in the worst houses, women were treated as part of the accommodation. Some keepers encouraged it. Some profited directly. Some just turned their heads and let the chaos write its own rules. The crying woman has gone quiet now, but someone else starts humming. You recognize the tune. Same one the fiddler played, that Irish lament. It seems to haunt this place like a thread pulled through a fraying coat. Familiar, but always unraveling. Eventually, sleep comes, or something like it. You drift in and out, mind caught in a fog of sickness and fatigue. When you wake, it's to movement, a sharp bump against the wall. The voices on the other side are louder now. There's a brief argument, a scuffle, something breaking, a chair, a plate. Then the unmistakable sound of skin against skin. You flinch, instinctively pulling your knees up. No one interferes. No one ever does. You press your hands to your ears and hold them there. The wall vibrates softly beneath you. Eventually it stops. A door slams. The room settles. You uncover your ears. And then you hear it. A lullaby, sung barely above a whisper, the notes stumbling, the lyrics half remembered, a mother's voice frayed from use. You don't know the song, but the tone is unmistakable. A baby cries once, then quiets. It's the most human thing you've heard in days. Here's a grotesque little fringe detail to chew on while you lay wide-eyed and paralyzed. There are reports of infants being born in doss houses and never leaving. Born into poverty, death, disease. No name, no records. Swaddled in rags, breastfed by starving mothers, rocked to sleep by exhaustion. Some survived, most didn't. Those who did learned the rules early. Don't cry too loud, don't wander too far, and don't ever expect anyone to remember your birthday. You don't sleep the rest of the night. Not really. Your cough comes back in fits, and your chest feels heavier with each breath, like your lungs are slowly filling with wet sand. You keep imagining what's on the other side of that wall. The women, the children, the things done to them, the deals made in shadows, the bodies that bend because there's no other choice. You wonder if Ruthie was over there before she vanished. By morning, the Doss house is a riot of smells and sound again. The cook's back at the pot, boiling something that smells like cabbage and betrayal. People shuffle in and out, murmuring, clearing throats, kicking rats aside. You sit up slowly, spine protesting, and glance toward the partition. A few boards have fallen loose. Through a thin gap, you catch a flash of a woman's shawl and the edge of a blanket, but that's all. You consider fixing the board, hammering it back into place with your boot heel, but it wouldn't matter. The wall was never built to separate. It was built to pretend. Here's your historical debate of the day. Was the division of men and women in Doss houses an act of protection or just theater? Some argue it was better than nothing, that even a thin wall offered some dignity. Others say it was worse, an illusion of safety that allowed abuse to flourish unchecked. Either way, what's clear is that no one was ever really protected in these places. Not from others, not from the city, not even from themselves. You step outside for air, but the outside doesn't offer much. London's coughing too. Thick fog choking the alleys, factories belching soot into the sky, horse dung dissolving underfoot. The street kids are out already, barefoot and shouting, chasing a dead pigeon with sticks. One of them pauses when he sees you and stares like you're the ghost. Maybe you are. You head toward the docks, not because you think there's work, but because it's better to move than sit. The idea of sitting still terrifies you now. When you're still, you hear the wall. When you're still, you feel the cough rising. When you're still, you start imagining what it might feel like to be dragged across the floor like the man 2 nights ago. Your legs take you past the tannery, past the soup kitchens, past the pawn shop with its 3 brass balls swaying in the wind. You don't stop anywhere. You're looking for something, anything, a place that doesn't smell like loss. You don't find one, but you do find a fence near the river, and you sit beside it, staring out at the black water. The fog rolls low over the surface, and the boats drift like sleepwalkers. You cough into your sleeve again, and this time it hurts. Deep and sharp. You taste copper. You spit, and the blood stains the cobblestone. You think of the woman behind the wall singing to her child. You think of how soft her voice was, and you wonder if that child will live long enough to hate the sound of it. You've heard of the rope room, but you've never seen it until tonight. It's the kind of place everyone jokes about when they've still got a coin or two to rub together, a last resort for the completely penniless. You thought it was a myth, honestly, some exaggerated story made up to scare newcomers. But it's real. It's very real. And you're standing in front of it now, shivering in the doorway as the keeper waves you inside with a grin that has nothing kind in it. "Penny for the rope," he says, hand out. "Half if you don't make it till morning." You can't tell if he's joking. You hand him the penny anyway. The room is smaller than the main hall. Low ceiling, no windows, just a single lantern burning in the corner. The air smells of sweat and wet hemp. There's a long, thick rope stretched across the space from one post to the other, about chest height. Beneath it, people are sitting shoulder to shoulder on benches, leaning forward, their arms draped over the rope like drunks at a tavern. Some already dozing, some snoring, some muttering nonsense. It looks like a scene from hell painted by someone who ran out of colors and decided to use only shades of gray. You take a place on the end of the bench. The wood is slick, either from condensation or from the ghosts of 1,000 exhausted bodies. The man beside you shifts to make room. He smells like gin and mildew and faintly of something burned. He gives you a nod that feels like a welcome to a secret club no one wanted to join. You drape your arms over the rope and try to get comfortable. You can't. The rope cuts into your underarms and rubs the skin raw within minutes. Your head bobs forward, but each time you start to doze, your chin jerks and you snap back upright. The constant pendulum of exhaustion. Someone across from you falls fully asleep and topples forward, hanging limp over the rope. He snores like an animal. No one helps him up. No one even looks. This is the rope's purpose. Cheap support, not comfort. The only bed you can't fall out of because you've already fallen as far as you can. Here's your solid historical fact for the night. Rope rooms were a real feature of the worst Victorian lodging houses. For a penny, you could rent a length of rope to lean on overnight instead of lying on the floor. It was considered a bargain. By morning, the keeper would sometimes come in with a knife and slice the rope, dropping everyone onto the ground to wake them up for the next shift of human misery. That's efficiency for you. The air grows thicker as the night deepens. Every breath feels borrowed. You count them, just to keep yourself awake. 1, 2, 3, cough, repeat. Your chest burns, but you can't afford to draw attention. One bad cough, one splash of blood on your sleeve, and the keeper might throw you out midnight. You've seen him do it before. No refunds. The man next to you starts talking quietly, like he's afraid the rope itself might listen. Used to be a sailor, he mutters, voice sandpaper rough. Lost my ship, lost my pay, lost my mind, I think. He laughs, then coughs so hard you're sure something vital has come loose. When he's done, he sighs and says, "Ain't the worst place I've slept, mind." At least it don't move with the tide. You don't answer. You don't have the energy to participate in someone else's tragedy. Your own's heavy enough. Still, you can't help but notice how the rhythm of the room changes as people settle. There's a strange intimacy to it. Dozens of broken bodies leaning together, swaying in unison, bound by the same sagging line of rope. For a moment, you almost feel connected to them, as though this shared discomfort forms some kind of communion. Then someone farts loudly, and the moment dies. The lantern sputters. Shadows wobble across the walls. You close your eyes, let your head drop forward. The rope bites harder into your arms, but you stop caring. Sleep comes in jolts. 5 minutes here, 3 there, broken by coughing or someone shifting or the distant slam of a door. Time loses meaning. All that exists is the weight in your limbs, the ache in your back, the steady creak of the rope under dozens of sleeping souls. And then, suddenly, it's morning. You know because the knife comes out. There's a loud twang as the rope snaps free, and everyone collapses at once. You tumble forward, chin smacking the bench in front of you. A groan ripples through the room, a chorus of pain and profanity. The keeper laughs from the doorway. Up, you lot. Rope's done for the night. No one thanks him. You push yourself upright, rubbing your chest where the rope burned your skin. The mark will stay for days, maybe weeks. You stretch your neck and watch the others shuffle out. Some limp, some blink like they've never seen light before. One man doesn't move at all, slumped over the bench, face hidden. You think he might just be sleeping. You hope he's just sleeping. You step outside into the cold dawn, and the world feels both too big and too quiet. The air is wet and sharp, and the fog still clings to the rooftops. Your arms ache, your lungs ache, even your soul feels bruised. But you're upright, and that's more than can be said for half the rope room regulars. Here's a quirky fringe detail that fits the mood. There were reports of the rope itself being recycled between lodging houses. If one broke, it was sold to another owner for a discount. The same frayed line could hold up hundreds of heads before finally rotting away. A kind of grim metaphor, really. London's poor, bound together by the same worn-out thread, passed around until it snapped. As the morning crowd fills the streets, you walk among them unnoticed. Office clerks with umbrellas, errand boys with baskets, women sweeping doorsteps that aren't theirs. You look like any other ghost in a city that's full of them. But the truth is, last night changed you. There's a rope burn across your chest, a mark that feels like it belongs to the city now. It's claimed you. You cough once, twice, and keep walking. You don't look back, because if you do, you'll see the keeper closing the rope room door, and you know someone inside won't be walking out today. You were warned. Everyone warned you. The streets talk, even when mouths are shut. The whisper runs like sewer water through every alley and under every arch. Don't get creative. Don't try the dodgy stuff. Don't play clever. And above all, don't try to earn your coin outside the thin line of what the city tolerates. But when your belly feels like it's folding in on itself and your cough has gone from nuisance to threat, desperation starts to sound an awful lot like opportunity. So you start asking questions, quietly, carefully, mostly near the docks, where rules blur and morals soften in the fog. You don't call it hustling. You call it looking, and the ones who know what you mean give you that slight tilt of the chin, that half grin, that you're about to be sorry look. It doesn't take long. By nightfall, you've got options. The first is simple if you've got the nerve. A man in a bowler hat offers you a bag full of old apothecary bottles and a script to read. Dr. Baudry's Wonder Elixir, soothing to the lungs, stimulating to the mind, and proven effective against ague, melancholia, and consumption. You taste it before agreeing. It burns going down, feels like gin spiked with kerosene. He grins when you cough. They like the burn, makes it feel like it's working. You take the job. 1 bottle, 1 coin, 2 if you throw in a testimonial with tears. You spend the morning hawking on street corners. You sell to 5 people, 3 old, 1 drunk, 1 just too tired to argue. You hate yourself with every pitch. Hate the hopeful look they give you. Hate the way you fake a cough and say, "I was nearly dead. This brought me back." Hate that you believe it might be true. You pocket your coins and vanish before anyone can try to return it. By afternoon, you've found a rhythm. You know which corners are safe, which keepers look the other way, and which customers will pay even more if you let them believe you're dying, and this little bottle is the only thing keeping you upright. You're a con man now. That's your job. And yet somehow, it feels better than nothing. But here's a delicious bit of historical rot. Victorian London was riddled with medical scams. Snake oil peddlers, lung tonics, cures for syphilis and hysteria and baldness. Each bottle louder and bolder than the last. They took out full-page ads in newspapers, hired actors to faint in public and be revived on cue. Many were just gin. Some were worse. A few were straight-up poison. And the line between criminal and entrepreneur, it was blurry at best. Your next offer comes from a toothless man named Skiv. That's all he gives you. Just Skiv. He tells you he's got a job that pays better. Simple work. Bit dirty, sure, but you'll eat. You press for details, but he shakes his head. Best you see it first. So you follow. Through a narrow alley, past a row of collapsed buildings, to the back entrance of what might have once been a butcher's. Inside, a table, a stack of wooden boxes, and the unmistakable smell of old death. Not human, not quite. Skiv tosses you a pair of gloves that don't match. We sort bones, he says. Big ones here, small ones there. Skulls, if you find any, set aside. Those fetch more. You ask where the bones come from. He smiles. People don't always keep track of cemeteries, do they? You don't ask again. You work for 4 hours, sorting the past into piles, trying not to gag. The gloves tear. The smell gets into your clothes, under your nails, into your thoughts. By the end, you're paid with a heel of bread and a 4-pence coin that looks like it's been buried too. Skiv slaps your back and tells you to come by next week. Got a shipment from Highgate coming in. Real old stuff. Fancy. You don't sleep that night. The images in your head are too sharp. Long fingers, tiny jaws, child-sized skulls that rattle when you move them. You try to forget, but the smell won't let you. The next day, the weather turns. Cold sweeps down like a blade, and the city hunches its shoulders. Everyone walks faster, speaks less, hides their hands in sleeves. You head back to the doss house with your pockets a little heavier, but your soul feeling bruised. The keeper doesn't say anything as you hand him the coin. He just eyes you for a long moment, then jerks his head toward the benches. Inside, the air feels sharper, almost sour. Someone's burned something they shouldn't have. Old cloth, maybe oil. It lingers like punishment. The crowd's thinner tonight. Fewer coughs, fewer noises. But you feel eyes on you, watching, weighing, as if the stink of what you've been doing clings to you. You sit, cough once, and it hurts. Deep this time. You press your sleeve to your lips and see pink. You wipe it away quickly. No one notices. Here's your fringe fact to ruin your appetite. Some of the dead sold to medical schools weren't entirely dead. There are cases, whispers, really, of people waking up mid-dissection, eyes fluttering just as the scalpel touched skin. Most of those stories were written off as myth, but in places where the poor weren't even listed in census rolls, how would anyone know? You think about that as you drift off on the bench, skin still crawling. The next morning, you try to go back to bottle pitching, but your voice cracks before you even get through the first line. Your chest tightens, your head spins. You spend the rest of the day slumped in an alley behind a bakery, inhaling flour dust and dreaming of loaves you'll never touch. By sunset, your coin is gone, and your options have folded in on themselves like rotten fruit. You return to the rope room that night. It's all you can afford. The same bench, the same creaking rope, the same burning sleep that leaves marks across your chest. You feel smaller this time, like the room itself has chewed off a part of you. The keeper walks by, pauses. Making money these days, are you? You say nothing, he grins. Just don't bring trouble here. You nod, because that's all you can do. The rope creaks, the bodies sag. And you think, maybe next time Skiv calls, you'll say yes. Maybe you'll start digging, not just sorting. After all, the dead can't complain. And you're not quite dead. Not yet. If there's a hierarchy in the doss house, and there is, always has been, it's not based on strength, money, or even how long you've been alive. It's based on time. Time spent inside. Time spent surviving. Every hour you last in this place earns you a grain of something that might pass for status. Not respect, exactly. More like recognition. Like how barnacles cling tighter to the ship the longer they're there. You're becoming a barnacle. It starts with where you sit. You've been using the same bench for over a week now, and no one's tried to take it from you in 3 nights. That means something. The keeper doesn't grunt at you anymore. He just holds out his hand, and you drop the coin in like it's a tax. You don't flinch when the rope creaks or the fiddler's song loops again. You've adapted. There are people here you now know by sight, if not by name. The man who sharpens buttons into makeshift coins. The tall woman who sleeps standing against the wall, arms crossed like she's guarding herself in death. The boy who never stops twitching. You're part of their tapestry now. No one talks about it, but you've been accepted. And that means you're now ranked. Unspoken rules reveal themselves. Where you can spit, who gets to use the water jug first, who can leave a bundle in the corner during the day and not come back to find it rifled through or gone. You've reached the point where someone even warns you. Not with words, just a glance and a slight shake of the head when a fight's about to break out. You get space. That's status. It also means you now have someone beneath you. It's a boy. New. Skin still clean enough to show bruises. Wearing a coat 3 sizes too big and shoes wrapped in twine. He comes in one night just after curfew, dragging a satchel and looking like someone told him this place would be a warm bed and friendly faces. Poor fool. You recognize the look immediately, the hope still clinging to him like a parasite. You watch him try to claim a corner. He picks the wrong one. One of the old regulars, a wiry man with hands like twigs and a permanent scowl, shoves him out with a boot. The boy doesn't fight back. He doesn't even speak, just moves, silent and confused, like a kicked dog. He ends up sitting near the stove, arms wrapped tight around himself, eyes wide. Later, you find his satchel rifled through. A tin cup's gone. His crust of bread is gone too. No one says a word. You don't help. You think about it, sure, but you don't move. That's not how things work here. You're not cruel, just calculated. You've earned your place. You're not about to throw it away playing savior for someone who won't last the week. He'll either learn the rules or vanish. That's how it's always been. That's how it always will be. Here's your historical context for that twinge of guilt you're trying to suppress. Victorian doss houses often had informal hierarchies among lodgers. Long-term residents enforced their own twisted form of order. Who got space, who got first dibs on food, even who had access to the slightly cleaner straw. New arrivals were fresh meat, easy targets, marked by the wrong kind of silence or too much talking. Climbing up the ranks didn't take money. It took endurance and the ability to look away. And you've gotten very good at looking away. Until the boy collapses. It happens 2 nights later. You hear a thud, a groan, and then silence. You turn, slow, knowing what you'll see. He's curled on the floor, hands clenched, face pale and slick with sweat. Someone mutters, "Drunk?" But you know better. You've seen that look in the tannery, heat sickness, maybe hunger, maybe something worse. He twitches once, then goes still. Nobody moves, not even you. Then, quietly, you hear it. Him trying to speak. His lips part, and he gasps, "Help!" That one word snaps something in you. You rise, step over bodies, kneel beside him. He's burning up. His pulse flutters under your fingertips like a frightened bird. He smells like vomit and stale bread, and something beneath it that's too familiar. Illness, real illness. You look up, and now people are watching you, waiting to see what you'll do. You carry him, badly, awkwardly, to the bench beside yours. It's not cleaner, but it's less damp. You cover him with your coat. You ask the fiddler for water, and he shrugs and hands over a cracked tin cup. Someone scoffs. Someone mutters, "Waste of space." You ignore them. For now, you've made a choice. You've used your rank. That night, you sit awake beside the boy as he shivers and mutters nonsense. You keep watch, the way Cutter once did for you. The boy sweats through your coat. He wets himself. He weeps in his sleep. But he's still breathing at dawn, and people nod at you differently now. A few even offer a crust. One woman, the one with the shawl stitched with stars, gives you half her turnip. No words, just a gesture. That's how the hierarchy works. You climb by stepping over the dead, or lifting someone up. But not both. Here's your odd historical fact of the day. Some long-term Doss House residents formed protective cliques, small groups that banded together for safety, pooled resources, kept watch over each other. Some even had rules and punishments for betrayal. Sociologists today call it proto-tribal behavior. Back then, they just called it survival. The boy, for what it's worth, makes it through the next day. Still fevered, but sitting up. He croaks out a thank you don't need to hear. You hand him a half-chewed piece of bread and tell him to eat it before someone steals it again. He smiles. You don't smile back. You're not here to be liked. You're here to last. You've learned to ignore the children, not because you want to. Of course not. You tell yourself that anyway. It's survival. Like not looking directly at a scab or holding your breath when you pass the tannery. You look past them, around them, through them. The smaller they are, the easier it is. Some are practically smoke, but they're there, always there, trailing behind the adults like shadows with bones. You see them out on the streets, half bundled in potato sacks, fingers red and raw, eyes too old for their faces. And they're inside the Doss houses too, which feels even worse. At least the street has space. Here, they're trapped, caged in with the stink and the hopelessness and the sharp elbows of grown men who stopped caring about innocence years ago. There are 4 kids in your Doss house this week, maybe 5. Hard to say if the 5th is just exceptionally small or unnervingly silent. They drift through the corners, sleep under benches, curl up under the coats of others if they're lucky, or if they've paid in ways you'd rather not imagine. One of them, a girl with cropped hair and a torn scarf tied around her wrist like a bracelet, always seems to be watching you. You don't know why. Maybe because you gave that boy some bread a few days ago. Maybe because you still flinch when someone screams at night. That marks you, apparently. The boy you helped is doing better. He walks now, eats more than he talks. You've caught him watching the girl, too. She's always moving. One of those kids who never stops, who's got that wild look in her eye like a bird that's been stepped on, but still pecks when cornered. You see her again one morning near the stove, crouched low and fiddling with something in her lap. You're curious, but you don't ask. Kids don't respond well to questions here. Eventually she stands, slips whatever it was into her coat, and disappears toward the partitioned-off women's side. That's the last you see of her for 2 days. Then, early one morning, just before sunrise, she shows up again. Bloody. Not covered in it, just spotted. Like it had splashed on her. Like she'd been too close to something that went wrong. She doesn't cry, doesn't speak, just crawls into a corner and curls up. The regulars take one look and go back to their own worlds. One mutters something about back alley justice. Another says, she'll learn. You say nothing. What could you say? Here's your grim historical fact for the day. Victorian Doss houses weren't just homes to vagrants and drunks. They were full of children, thousands of them, some born into the system, others orphaned by plague, fire, crime, or indifference. Few made it to adulthood. The ones who did were rarely whole. Disease got many. Violence got more. Some just vanished. They'd slip into the night like coins down a drain, and no one noticed except maybe the one other child who had shared a blanket with them. Some nights, the girl sleeps near your bench. Not beside you, just close enough to feel the heat of a body that isn't hostile. She doesn't talk, doesn't ask for anything. She's got a way of making herself smaller than she is, like a stray that knows not to bark when the boots get too close. You give her a crust once. You catch her watching a second time and look away. Then one night, she disappears again. This time, you notice. You ask the boy, he shrugs. You ask the shawl woman, She doesn't look up. Then a full day later, you hear about the pit. It's not far from the Doss house, just off an alley you usually avoid, behind a row of collapsed buildings where the cities refuse to send cleanup crews. People say it's a dumping ground. Refuse, debris, old mattresses, dead dogs, filth that no one wants to deal with. And sometimes, other things. Someone tells you, quietly, that the girl was seen there. You don't want to believe it, but the knot in your stomach is back, the one that only shows up when death's nearby. So you go. The pit is worse than you imagined. A crater full of broken furniture, ash, and rot. The kind of place where even rats look reluctant. There's no body, of course not. Not now. But there's a scarf, torn, tied in a knot, and it matches the one she wore around her wrist. You stare at it for a long time. Someone walks past and mutters, "Best not to ask questions." Might end up in the same pile. Here's a little-known fringe horror. In parts of London, especially the East End, unofficial dumps became the resting place for more than just trash. If a child died in a Doss house and the body couldn't be quietly moved to a graveyard, or if they died out in the cold and no one wanted to pay for removal, they'd be buried in pits like this. Sometimes they weren't even dead yet, just close enough that no one wanted to stick around and find out. You walk back to the Doss house slowly. That night, the stove runs low. The fiddler's replaced by a man blowing tunelessly into a bottle. The boy who once thanked you is asleep near the door, arms curled around a bundle of rags, like it's a pet. The girl's corner stays empty. The next day, a new child shows up. Barefoot, dirty, eyes too wide. No one says a word. They don't need to. You've learned the rules. Children are born, children vanish, and the benches stay full. It's London's version of balance. It starts with boots. Not the familiar clatter of weary soles or the soft slap of barefoot wanderers. These are heavy, deliberate, and echo too loud across the wooden floor. The kind of sound that stops you mid-chew. You hear the door slam open, hard enough to rattle the old window panes, and suddenly the Doss house isn't just stinking and sad. It's alert. Every head lifts. Every body tenses. Even the stove's hiss seems to hush itself. Police? You know it before you see them. There's always a feeling that comes first, a pressure in the air, like someone dragging a full chamber pot across the floor right behind you. Then comes the voice, sharp and clipped, barking something about all men up and nobody moves. The keeper's already standing, hands up, playing harmless, doing that oily thing with his face like he's the most agreeable man in London. You've seen him spit on his own floor during inspections and then swear he scrubs it nightly. There are 4 coppers, uniforms wrinkled, but still official. One's tall and scowling, one's short and twitchy. The others don't even bother speaking. They carry lanterns and truncheons, the latter swinging casually like an unspoken promise. The tall one paces the room slowly, eyes sweeping over the benches like he's choosing a cut of meat. He stops near the stove and nods at the boy sleeping by the wall. "That him?" A pause. Then a voice from the door. One you hadn't noticed, raspy and female, full of fear but also vengeance. "That's the one. Took my satchel, my coin. Tried to..." She doesn't finish the sentence. The boy stirs, looks up, realizes. He bolts. It's a bad decision. There's nowhere to run. One copper grabs his arm. Another shoves his face down. Someone knocks over a bowl in the chaos. The lantern tips, catches briefly on a blanket, and for one awful second, you think the place is going to go up in flames. But the blanket is too wet with God knows what, and the spark dies with a hiss. They drag him out screaming. No one stops them. The door slams again. Silence. You stare at the empty patch where the boy was. You wonder if it was true. Wonder if the woman really saw him, or just picked the weakest face in the room. You've seen it happen. Blame doesn't need evidence. It just needs someone quieter than the accuser. Here's a fact to chew on. Police raids in doss houses were a regular spectacle in 19th century London. Sometimes it was for criminals, thieves, vagrants, escaped convicts. Sometimes it was to clear the place before a public event nearby. Other times it was just pressure from wealthy neighbors who didn't want to see the city's filth pile up too close to their front doors. The law didn't care about the poor. It cared about visibility. You watch the keeper resume his place at the desk like nothing happened. You wonder how many coins he makes when he helps with arrests. You wonder what stories he's told to make himself indispensable to the coppers. You wonder if he knows which of you are next. Later that night, you hear the older woman with the shawl whisper to someone, "It wasn't the boy. He never left the bench. I was watching." You roll over and face the wall. The next day, rumors fly. The boy's in jail. The boy's dead. The boy escaped. The boy confessed. The boy ratted out others. None of it's true. Or maybe all of it is. You'll never know. Truth doesn't live here. Only consequences do. And now, everyone's on edge. You see it in the way people flinch at sudden movements, how the stove circle is less crowded, how even the snorers are quieter. The girl with the stitched scarf never came back. The boy's gone. The ropes are thinner. And you're beginning to realize the hierarchy isn't about rank. It's about exposure. If you're too loud, you draw attention. If you're too silent, you vanish. The trick is somewhere in the middle. That night, you hear boots again. Different ones this time. Softer. Quieter. They don't belong to police. You don't sit up. But you watch. Two men, dressed like dockers, but too clean, stroll through the main room as if they own the place. One flicks a coin to the keeper. The keeper nods toward the women's partition. You try not to look, but you do. A woman is brought forward. She doesn't protest. She doesn't speak. She walks like her feet forgot how. The two men flank her like arms of the same machine. They disappear out the back. No one says a word. You know you won't see her again. Here's your fringe fact for this miserable evening. Some doss house owners doubled as pimps or worked with traffickers. It was lucrative. Poor women owed coin, offer their services to make up the rent. It wasn't called trafficking then. It was just business. And if they didn't come back, well, one less mouth to feed and a new bed to rent. You go to sleep with your boots still on that night. You dream of rope snapping, of benches breaking, of lanterns falling, and no one putting the fire out. You dream of boots, always boots. In the morning, your chest hurts worse. The cough won't stop. You taste blood again. You sit up and realize the spot on your coat where you wiped your mouth is darker now, stiffer. You hear someone say the workhouse is taking applications again, that if you get in early, they might not turn you away. They've reopened a new wing for the dying. For a moment you think, maybe. Then you remember what you've heard about the workhouse. Rules, labor, sermons, silence, and a coffin with your name carved the day you arrive. You lie back down. The copper-scented cough lingers, and the bench creaks, welcoming you back like a cradle you'll never leave. The first frost arrives like an ambush. One morning the city wakes beneath a skin of ice, thin, brittle, and already cracking, but it's enough to change everything. The air tastes metallic. Your breath hangs before you like cigarette smoke. Even the rats sound slower when they scurry past. The Thames moves sluggishly, chunks of ice floating down like pale ghosts heading for the sea. London in winter is a special kind of cruel. Beautiful from a distance, deadly up close. Inside the doss house, you can feel the cold, even through the damp boards. It seeps into the benches, creeps up your legs, licks at your ribs. The stove's dead. There's no coal. You can still smell the ghost of last night's fire. Char, ash, a faint trace of warmth. But it's long gone now. Everyone's huddled tighter than usual, body heat pooling in desperate clusters. You sit near the wall, back to the bricks, coat wrapped tight. It helps. Barely. The keeper doesn't bother lighting a candle this morning. He's conserving oil. He sits behind his desk, hat pulled low, gloved hands clasped together like a man guarding the gates of hell. He looks worse than usual, gray-skinned, lips cracked. You'd almost pity him if he weren't the kind of man who could throw someone out into this cold for breathing too loud. You hear a noise in the corner, a dull thud. You don't turn at first. You already know what it is. When you finally glance over, there's a shape slumped against the wall, one of the old men, the one who muttered sermons in his sleep. You can't see his breath. The woman beside him checks his wrist once, then pulls the coat off his shoulders and wraps it around herself. No one objects. No one calls the keeper. He'll deal with the body later, after breakfast, maybe. Here's your history lesson to pair with your numb fingers. The winter of 1879 was one of the harshest in Victorian memory. The Thames froze solid in places, ships stalled, and even the rookeries, those dense, maze-like neighborhoods where families stacked atop each other like timber, saw bodies piling faster than they could be buried. Charities ran out of coal by December. Workhouses turned away the dying for lack of room. God's pruning, one newspaper called it, as if mercy were seasonal. You're coughing again, harder this time. It feels like your ribs might snap. Each fit leaves you dizzy, eyes watering. The boy beside you, what's left of him, stares but says nothing. He's changed too. He's quieter, thinner, learning to ration even his movements. You see your own reflection in him now. Endurance masquerading as life. Later that day, the keeper opens the door for a city man, a church inspector by the look of him. His boots are clean, which makes him an alien here. He steps in with a handkerchief over his nose, looking around like he's studying a zoo exhibit. "How many beds?" he asks. The keeper answers, 30. The man looks skeptical. "And how many, lodgers?" The keeper hesitates. 30. He says it again, louder, like that'll make it true. You can count at least 50. The man jots something in a notebook, mutters, "Charity report," and leaves as fast as he came. The door slams. The cold rushes back in, greedy for company. Everyone exhales at once, like the room's been holding its breath. Here's your quirky fringe fact for the day. Church inspectors were often paid per inspection, not per improvement. Their job was to document misery, not fix it. Reports filled with words like adequate and sufficient were stamped, filed, and forgotten. The poor became statistics, then ghosts, then compost. By evening, the frost thickens. You hear the crackle of it on the windows. The fiddler's gone, probably dead, probably frozen somewhere nearby, but someone else hums in his place. A woman, softly, tunelessly, the kind of sound that makes you ache without knowing why. You pull your coat tighter, though the lining's gone stiff. Your toes feel distant, as if they've already decided to leave you. The boy is shaking now. You give him what's left of your bread. He eats it in 2 bites, thanks you with a grunt. His breath fogs in the air between you, and for a second, you see your own breath mingle with his, tiny, fragile ghosts colliding. You try not to think about how much longer either of you will be breathing anything. There's a commotion near the door. The keeper's arguing with someone outside, a woman by the sound of it. Her voice is desperate, raw. "Please, just for tonight," the keeper growls back. "Full up." She says she has a child. He says he doesn't care. There's a pause, then a dull smack. The door slams. Silence. You stare at it for a long time, half expecting it to open again. It doesn't. You lie down. Your body feels heavy in a new way, like gravity itself's grown bored of keeping you upright. The cough rattles, then subsides. You feel oddly warm, which worries you more than the cold ever did. You've heard stories about that. The last warmth before the end. You push the thought aside. Here's your scholarly debate of the night. Was the Victorian poor's suffering preventable or simply ignored? Some argue the Industrial Revolution stretched society too thin, that poverty was an inevitable byproduct of rapid change. Others say it wasn't inevitability, it was neglect. London's rich threw charity balls, while the poor burned furniture for warmth. You don't need a historian's opinion to know which feels truer when your fingers won't close anymore. The room quiets again. The stove clicks. Somewhere outside, a dog howls. You close your eyes and picture your old life, whatever fragments remain of it. A bed that didn't creak, a window that closed, the smell of bread that wasn't stolen, the sound of laughter, maybe yours. Then you picture the girl with the scarf, the boy with the fever, the old man whose coat you now recognize across the room. They're all gone, and you're still here. And somehow, that feels like the worst part. There's a man who talks to the wall every night. You've never caught his name. Maybe no one has. But he sits near the stove, knotted fingers draped over his knees, murmuring steadily as if the bricks are listening. He doesn't beg, doesn't ask for food, just talks. Sometimes he smiles at nothing, nods like he's being answered, then chuckles softly, the sound drifting through the doss house like smoke. It used to scare you a little. Now it just blends into the nightly rhythm, like the coughs, the shuffles, the quiet sobbing, the whispered prayers to gods that haven't helped in a long time. The cold has settled in for good. Every creak of the boards is louder. The windows frost over by dusk. A tin cup left on the floor develops a skin of ice overnight. People are sleeping closer together than ever, more like livestock than lodgers, huddling not out of affection, but mutual desperation. You don't recognize half the faces anymore. The old lot, the regulars, the familiar, are thinning out. Some left, but most, they've simply stopped waking. There's a woman who sits across from you now, bundled in layers of cloth that don't match, shawls, skirts, even a pillowcase worn like a hood. She doesn't speak, doesn't blink much either. You caught her once scraping wax from a melted candle into a tin spoon, then chewing it slowly like porridge. The keeper watched her do it and didn't say a word. You're not sure if that's compassion or laziness. Either way, it's the closest thing to mercy you've seen him offer. That night, someone dies again. This time, it's the man who talked to the wall. He's slumped just as usual, chin to chest, hands loose in his lap. Only difference is, he doesn't stir when the keeper stomps past, doesn't flinch when someone sneezes nearby. You notice first, his stillness is wrong, not peaceful but frozen. You lean over, squint in the dim light, and there it is. That hollow slackness in the jaw, the tongue peeking out like it's forgotten what to do. No breath, no warmth. You say nothing. No one does anymore. Eventually, the keeper comes over, pokes the man with his boot, and sighs. Another one, he mutters, already annoyed. He signals two of the stronger lodgers, men with arms like rope and no apparent emotion left, and they lift the body like it's just another sack of potatoes. You watch the man's head loll back. His hat falls off. There's a dent in the side of his skull you hadn't noticed before. Old, new, Doesn't matter now. They carry him to the rear, where the back door opens to a yard full of coal dust and broken crates. He'll be gone by morning. Dumped in the pit? Taken for medicine? No one ever knows. No one ever asks. It's better not to. You just adjust your coat, shift your weight, and try to forget how easily a person becomes scenery. Here's your fact for the evening. The line between sanity and madness in Victorian slums was more of a smudge. Conditions were so degrading, so monotonous, so inescapably grim that many simply slipped out of themselves. Psychosis, dementia, despair. Call it what you like. There was no treatment, no safety net, no padded room. You lost your mind and kept your bench until your body followed. Someone once said the difference between living and surviving is purpose. In the Doss house, purpose is a joke. You wake, you eat what you can, you trade, you steal, you sleep. That's it. Anything more is a fantasy, and fantasy's expensive. Still, some cling to it. You hear about a man on the other side of Whitechapel who's convinced he's royalty, calls himself Duke of Dorset, swears the Queen sent him here as a test. People laugh, but he's alive, and that's more than can be said for the ones who understand reality too clearly. Here's your fringe fact. Strange but true. Some Victorian mental asylums refused the poorest patients because they were considered hopeless cases. No funds, no families, no records. They were turned away, sent back to the slums, or left to die in the streets. The government called it economical. The churches called it divine judgment. You call it what it is, abandonment. That night you can't sleep, not from fear, from stillness. Too many people have vanished. There's more bench space now. That used to be a luxury. Now it feels like a warning. You sit up, back aching, and stare across the room. You count 8 sleepers. There were 16 last week. You wonder if the keeper's pocketing their payments, still renting out their ghosts. Wouldn't surprise you. He could tell the inspectors this place holds 30, even if it's half full and half dead. Who would question him? You hear someone sobbing softly, not the loud, wild sobs of fresh grief, just the kind that leaks out of a person when they've finally given up pretending they'll be okay. It's coming from a man hunched in the corner. Might be new, might have been here the whole time. Doesn't matter. His face is buried in his arms. His body shakes like a busted bellows. You watch for a moment. You think about going over. You don't. You've learned. Not every drowning man wants a hand. You roll over and face the wall. There's a spider crawling just above your head. You watch it spin its web, delicate and silent, threading its way between 2 bent nails hammered in God knows how long ago. The spider moves with purpose, mindless but sure. You envy it. Here's your debate for the night. One scholars still chew on like tough bread. Was the decline of mental health among the Victorian poor a consequence of poverty or a cause? Did the squalor break their minds, or were they already broken, cast off, left to rot in the shadows? It's a neat argument for people who've never slept on a wooden bench next to a body. You've lived the answer. Eventually the sobbing stops. The spider finishes its thread, and you close your eyes, wishing for silence and dreading it in equal measure. The real horror here isn't the smell, or the cold, or even the dead. It's what happens to your thoughts when there's no one left to distract you. You hear the word workhouse before you see the line forming outside its gates. It slips between conversations like smoke, spoken low, tight, and mostly with bitterness. They've reopened the Bethnal wing. No more than 30 taken. Soup every day. Blankets too. It sounds like salvation. It also sounds like a trap. You don't know which yet, but you're desperate enough now that the difference doesn't matter. That morning, you drag yourself out of the Doss house earlier than usual, ribs sore, mouth dry, the air sharp as splinters in your lungs. You follow the direction of the talk, drifting alongside others who wear the same look, part hunger, part disbelief, part refusal to hope. You pass alleys you used to sleep in, storefronts with broken glass, the soot-stained church with its bell long fallen silent. Everything is gray, the sky, the pavement, your hands. And then you see it. The line. It snakes along the stone wall outside the Bethnal Green workhouse, coiled with men and women hunched like crows. Some have bundles, most don't. A child cries near the front. His mother shushes him without even turning her head. No one speaks. No one dares. You get in line. The cold presses in, squeezing your joints until they creak when you shift your weight. Every breath feels thinner, like you're only getting the leftovers from the man in front of you. The line moves slow, one step every few minutes. You wait over an hour before you even see the iron gates up close. 2 guards stand by them. Not police, but close enough. Thick coats, boots polished, batons at their hips. Their expressions are somewhere between bored and disgusted. "Name," one of them barks when you reach the front. You give yours or something like it. You've forgotten which name is real. They don't care. "Any known illness?" You hesitate. He narrows his eyes. "You got the cough?" You nod once. He jerks his head. "Infirmary wing, back entrance. Next." You're shunted aside while others shuffle in. You don't even get to go through the front gate. A boy leads you around the back, past the coal pile and the privy pits, to a side door that looks like it hasn't opened in weeks. It squeals on its hinges like a creature in pain. Inside, the warmth hits you like a blow. Thick, stale, but real. You haven't felt heat like this in days. It wraps around you, dulls your vision, makes your knees go soft. A nurse meets you in the corridor. She's not unkind, but she's tired. Hair pinned back tight, sleeves rolled, hands red from washing. She doesn't speak as she leads you into a narrow room. 8 beds, all full. Most of the men in them are coughing. One is wheezing so hard it sounds like a pump struggling for water. Another just stares at the ceiling, mouth open, unmoving. You get the 9th bed. It's not much, just a cot, stained and sagging, but it's yours. You sit down, unsure if you're allowed. No one stops you. The nurse drops a folded blanket onto your lap. You unfold it slowly, fingers shaking, and wrap it around your shoulders. The weight of it nearly breaks you. You haven't held anything warm in weeks. You don't cry. You don't dare. But your throat tightens in a way that isn't the cough. Here's your historical fact for today's miserable miracle. Workhouses were meant as deterrents, not sanctuaries. Designed to be worse than the streets, they offered food and shelter only at the price of freedom and dignity. Families were separated. Men, women, and children lived in separate wings, often never seeing each other again. Those deemed able-bodied were put to work. Stone breaking, oakum picking, coffin making. The sick were usually left to the infirmary until they either recovered or didn't. The nurse gives you a spoon of something hot. Tastes like oats boiled in tin. You eat it in 3 bites and feel it spread down your chest like a drop of sunlight. You fall asleep without meaning to, head against the wall, blanket clutched like a child's toy. You wake in the dark. Someone is crying. Not loud, not performative, just slow, steady weeping from the cot across from yours. You look over. It's an old man with no teeth. His hands are folded like he's praying, but you don't think he believes in anything anymore. You don't either. Later you hear the nurses whispering. If he doesn't wake by morning, we'll shift the others. Use his bed for the new ones. How long can the infirmary hold 12? It's not cruel. It's just math. The next morning, the man is gone. So is his blanket. You're given a basin of water and a rag. No soap. You wash your face, hands, neck. The water is cold, but it bites less than the wind outside. You glance at yourself in the broken mirror above the washstand and nearly recoil. You look like something that crawled out of a burial trench. Eyes sunken, skin waxy, lips cracked. But you're clean. Mostly. It's the first time in weeks you haven't smelled like a mattress left in the rain. And here's your weird fringe fact to mark the moment. Some workhouse inmates would fake illness just to be transferred to the infirmary. Not because it was safe, it wasn't, but because it was quiet, and sometimes you got a blanket. Inmates would eat chalk to feign consumption, cough on purpose, lie perfectly still for days. Death, it seemed, came with more dignity than life. You stay 2 days. The cough eases, barely. The warmth helps. So does the silence. No one here yells. No boots slam. No one tries to take your crust of bread or your spot on the bench. The guards pass through, but they don't speak to you. You're invisible again, but this time, it almost feels peaceful. Still, you can't stay. They tell you gently that the bed must be cleared for someone sicker. They hand you a small roll, bread, real bread, and a scarf so thin it's more suggestion than garment. Then they open the back door. The cold greets you like an old friend. You walk slowly through the streets, scarf wrapped tight, bread clutched like treasure. You pass others, hobblers, limpers, widows, shell-shocked men staring into nothing. You don't speak. They don't either. You're thinking of your cot in the doss house, of the way the bench felt beneath your spine, of the fiddler who vanished, of the girl with the scarf, of the boy who never came back. You're thinking maybe you belong there after all. Maybe the doss house is your coffin now, and you're just a very patient corpse. You make it back to the doss house just before nightfall. The streets are already curling in on themselves, shadows stretching long over cobblestones, fog descending like a shroud. You move slower now. Everything aches in a deeper way. Not just your limbs, but your inside, like something vital has been quietly unraveling, and you've only just noticed. Still, your feet know the way. They turn without instruction, toward the familiar rot, the scent of unwashed bodies and boiled something. You tell yourself you're just going back for one more night. You know that's a lie. The keeper barely looks at you. He's seen hundreds like you crawl back through that door, all of them thinking they'd escaped. He takes your coin without a word. You want to ask if your usual spot's free, but you don't. You just look toward the corner near the wall where you used to sit, where the boy slept, where the girl once watched you from the shadows. It's empty. No surprise. Most things are these days. You sit. The bench creaks in recognition. You wrap your thin scarf around your neck twice, even though it does nothing, and draw your coat close like a curtain between you and the world. There's a new man by the stove, young, jittery, boots too big for his feet. He keeps pulling something from his pocket and putting it back again. A nail, a coin, a bone, doesn't matter. You know that kind of twitch. It's the look of someone still clinging to the edge of reason with fingernails. Across the room, a woman is cutting her own hair with a piece of glass. She gathers the strands in her lap like something sacred. No one tells her to stop. The air is heavy with the hush of people who've seen too much and still know they haven't seen the worst. You cough, and heads turn. Not many. Just enough to remind you that in here, your breath is everyone's business. You pull the scarf up over your mouth, pretend it helps. You don't cough again. Here's your final historical fact, neatly folded like a funeral card. Many Victorians died anonymously in doss houses. No death certificate, no family, sometimes not even a proper burial. The body would be taken, carted to the workhouse morgue or a pauper's pit, and the bench scrubbed. Or not. A new soul would take the spot, often before the warmth had faded. Life flowed in. Death flowed out. No ceremony, just a routine. You sleep poorly, dreamless mostly. At some point, someone screams. Just a short, sharp cry that dies almost instantly. No one moves. You don't even open your eyes. That's how deep you've gone now. There's no alarm in your body anymore, only echoes. When you wake, it's to quiet. That's unusual. Even in the DOS house, morning brings shuffling, groaning, a kind of half-choreographed chaos. But not today. Today it's still. Too still. You sit up slowly, joints stiff, heart suddenly loud in your chest. You scan the room. The benches are half full. Some of the regulars remain. The fiddler, somehow returned but silent now. The scarf woman, her eyes darker than ever. The man who sharpens buttons, asleep with his hands tucked into his shirt. But someone's missing. The boy. You ask the keeper. He shrugs. Didn't wake up. You wait for more. You don't get it. No one mourns here. Grief is too expensive. So is hope. They say the body was taken before dawn, wrapped in a curtain and dragged through the back door. Maybe he's in a real grave now. Probably not. You feel something sink inside you. Something deeper than sadness. It's the kind of ache that has no sound, no shape. Just wait. You step outside that afternoon. Not because you want to, but because you need to breathe air that hasn't been coughed out of a dozen lungs. The fog is back, but thinner today. The streets are glazed with ice, slippery but glittering in the pale light. You walk slowly, aimlessly, following nothing. You pass a bakery with no bread, a church with no prayers, a school with no children. You end up near the pit. It looks smaller now, though you know it isn't. Your eyes have just changed. You stare at the mound of frozen refuse and think of the girl, the scarf, the others. You wonder how many names the city forgot this winter alone. You wonder how long until yours is one of them. Here's your final fringe fact. Something almost too bitter to swallow. Some DOS house lodgers were unknowingly used for medical study. Unclaimed bodies, especially those from the poorest districts, were quietly transferred to hospitals and schools. Cut open, poked, displayed. Their last dignity stripped beneath a glass dome, surrounded by the curious eyes of men who would never step foot in the world those bodies came from. You walk back to the DOS house just before dark. Your body feels slow, your hands like stone. You hand over your last coin. The keeper says nothing, just points. You take your place on the bench. You close your eyes. You listen to the soft breathing of those still clinging to the edge. And you wonder, if tonight is your last night, who will take your place? Will they notice the shape you left behind in the boards? Will they sleep more soundly because you're gone? Probably not. But maybe, just maybe, they'll find the warmth you left behind and think, someone lived here. Someone tried. Hey guys, if you're still awake, and honestly, I wouldn't blame you if you drifted somewhere in the middle of that last cough. Take a deep breath. Yeah, that one. You made it through London, through the frost, through the stink and the benches and the endless sound of boots on cobblestones. You survived where thousands didn't. That's no small thing. Close your eyes for a second. Picture that DOS house again, but empty this time. The stove still cold, the rope sagging, the benches worn smooth. The ghosts are quieter now. The girl's scarf is folded neatly on the sill. The boy's laughter, if you strain, is just a faint echo, like wind under the door. The city hums outside, modern, alive, unrecognizable, and you realize how far you've traveled, even if it was only in your head. Every city has its forgotten corners, its stories that rot between bricks. The Victorians didn't mean to invent homelessness. They just learned to ignore it better than anyone before. But you saw it. You walked through it. You breathed that air and came out the other side with a bit more weight in your chest. Maybe empathy smells faintly of soot. If you're listening in the dark right now, maybe under a blanket or with the fan humming the way I asked at the start, let that sound be your rope tonight. The good kind, the one that holds instead of cuts. Because the truth of history isn't in the kings or the wars. It's in the benches, in the coughs, in the quiet moments where someone tried to help another survive one more night. So sleep easy, traveler. London's fog is lifting, the lamps are dimming, and somewhere the stove's finally warm again.